Hey everybody, and welcome. We're going to go ahead and get started right now with our demo. So to start things off, let's just go over our little overview of what we're going to be covering today. So what's the goal? What are we going to be doing today? Today we're going to be creating some of these large river rocks. Here's a render of the finished material that I made a while back. We're going to be walking through this process, and I'm going to break down how I achieved this. We'll also try, if we have time, to get through to the next one. So let's go ahead and jump back over to that overview, and let's talk about our reference. So our reference sheet right here is going to be covering our beach scene. I am currently creating this beach scene as kind of a side project, something I was possibly making a tutorial out of, just to sharpen my skills and practice. So the main reference here is just going to be this beach. As you can see, this beach has these larger boulders, but I want to do a combo of a couple of things for this scene. I have some overall goals that I want to create. So what I'm trying to do is create a large beach rock, a small beach rock, and then some sort of sand. We won't be going over the seashell demos, but I'll show you what I have and what I'm planning to do with them a little bit later. So we'll be making this this kind of idea, but let's start with these first two textures. Our main reference here is going to be this guy. This is pretty much what I'm shooting to achieve. If we jump back to that main reference, you can kind of compare the two. These are what I was shooting for. So it still needs a little bit of work, but it's close. If we jump back, we're also going to be seeing our secondary reference images. This is what I'm going to be using to color sample from for both of these images. They're fairly similar, but they're not at all the same, really, with the colors and the shapes. These rocks looks like they've been on the elements for longer. They have kind of that faded look, almost calcified, or maybe it's the salt from the ocean air. And then when we jump down to this beach river rock, obviously there's a scale difference. So these are the big ones we're going to be creating, and then we're going to be creating the smaller river rock. As you can see here, out of all the references I have, I went through textures.com, maybe Megascans, just hunting for some of these references that I could use. All right, so here is one of the main references for my small pebbles. I think it's a nice small balance, and it's going to be a nice blend between these big rocks. It's probably something like this, maybe not this large, but close, to something much smaller. And then all of that is going to blend with that sand, and we'll kind of get this look. But now picture in between these really large rocks, having those smaller rocks blending in there too. It could be a really cool look, something like this. So you get a nice blend of those small rocks and those much larger rocks. And of course, here's our sand. So now that we have that idea, how are we going to achieve this? Well, we're going to be using a couple different tools. Primarily, we're going to be using ZBrush and Substance Designer. I'll be using a little bit of Maya here and there just to kind of get some very small detail things out. Not as important of details such as the planes we'll be sculpting on or the reference scales we'll be using. Tools-wise, if you're proficient with ZBrush and Substance Designer, this should be fairly easy to follow along with. I'll do my best to break this down as I go. We only have 2 hours, and this is definitely a more time-consuming process than 2 hours, so I might have to gloss over some things. Maybe if we have questions at the end, this is something we can fall back on. And lastly, why this workflow? So why this workflow for creating something like this? Why not use straight up Substance Designer? Why not use whatever it might be? So Substance Designer, I feel, doesn't work that well with these really large shapes. When it comes to stacking these large boulders, or rather these large stones, if you want them to not look like they're penetrating each other, it's going to be a challenge to get these laid out and not obviously penetrating into each other. Now there's some issues here and there, but this is just the nature of a tile texture. Obviously we're looking at that tile texture from straight up and down. From here, looks pretty solid. As for the small one, we're going to be using Substance Designer for this. What's cool is we're going to be able to make this river stone, and we're going to straight up use what we create from this river stone to directly create these ones. That way these two textures match flawlessly. And we'll get into that much later. So let's go ahead and get started. The first program we're going to be jumping into is going to be Maya. So let's move our little reference sheet out of the way. All right, so let's open up Maya. the first thing that I'm going to do is I need to set up my grid. I like working in Unreal's units because Unreal is kind of one of the go-to scales for what we're doing. So if I go to Display, Grid, and open up our grid settings, I'm going to change the length and the width to 1000 and the grid lines to 10 and subdivisions to 1. So this basically means we are set up to match Unreal's grid. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create a plane. Now I'm going to scale this plane up to like 100 units. This is more than enough. Whoops, not 1. Let's do 100. That'll make things a little bit easier. I also want to switch my plane options to 6. I want to have 6 subdivisions. We're going to be sculpting mainly inside of these 2 right here, or rather these 4 quadrants. Okay, now that we have that, next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to rotate so we're on the Z. So we want to have this plane rotated so it's facing towards us in the Z. That way it's facing directly at us when we bring it into ZBrush. So make sure you zero that out, rather set it to 90. And this should work just great. Now again, this is the area we're going to be working in. You can delete history, freeze transforms if you want. I have that set up to some hotkeys. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Control D. I'm going to bring this out. And I'm just going to go around these borders. I'm going to get rid of these little chunks. All right, the next thing I'm going to do is grab my multi-cut tool. I'm just going to cut here, and I'm just going to cut these little corners into triangles. We'll do that quick. Now that we have this, I'm just going to delete these interior faces. I don't need them. I just want this as my little frame. So if we look at this stacked right on top of each other, this little sculpt frame is what we're going to be using to frame up inside of ZBrush. This will all make sense when we get there shortly. Let's bring this guy a little bit behind 0, 1. So now we have these 2 sitting right here. Freeze transforms, delete history. We now have our sculpt plane, and we now have our frame. The next thing that we need to do is we need to go ahead and UV this guy. That way we get our correct tiling, and this works exactly as expected. So let's open up our UV editor. Now, by default, your grid may not be set to the correct value that we need. So what you can do is you can go up to View, Grid, and we can set this, for instance, if I reset this to basics, hit apply, you can see we have a lot more grid tiles to work with. But what I want to do is I want to essentially scale this whole thing up, and I want to snap it perfectly. So these UVs that you see in the middle, that sculpt frame, I want them to snap perfectly to 0 to 1. So let's go back and grab our grid options. I'm going to set this to 16, and point to 5. And then the subdivisions we can leave at 2. So let's hit apply. And next thing I'm going to do, as you can see, if I move this over, this has 16 squares in it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go shift right click, snap, and we're going to go to match grid. And now all we got to do is set this. If we reset the settings again, all we got to do is set this to 16 by 16 and hit apply. Let's zoom in a little bit and see what it does. There we go. So that snapped perfectly right there. That's exactly what we need to kind of get this going. Let's go ahead and close this out. We have everything we need right here. So we'll freeze transforms, delete history. I'm going to export these out separately. So I'm going to first select my plane, file, export selection. And we're just going to navigate to our desktop, our Beach Rock tutorial, and let's do a new folder, and we'll call it Full Sail Demo. So we'll start with sculpt plane frame up here, and then we'll just type in sculpt plane. We're going to be using the sculpt plane for quite a few things, so be sure to name this stuff and keep this stuff nicely organized. I say that as if I'm really good at doing it. So I'm just going to select that frame, hit G, and we're just going to name this one sculpt frame. Okay, and that's pretty much all we need to do for the Maya portion right now. We'll jump back in here in a little bit. But let's jump over to ZBrush Part 1. So let's jump in and do ZBrush. Okay, as you can see, I have my own custom user interface here. If I bring in this little polygon, I'm going to kind of just give you a brief overview of what's happening here. So my custom UI is set up with all the tools that I need on my day-to-day basis. I use a ton of different things, but predominantly we're going to be using things like Dynamesh, polygroups. If we jump over to, let's see, if we jump over to polygroups, now you can see auto groups is here. If these highlight while I'm kind of jumbling through menus, so you can see that highlights, that means that that's the tool that I have up there hidden. If you're not familiar with any of these tools, I definitely recommend looking this kind of stuff up. Again, Dynamesh going to be one of the more important ones, and polygroups are going to be things that I'm using pretty often, so I have them there. I have my brushes here. Sometimes I use the buttons. Sometimes I just shoot kind of from the hip with that one, and I'll just grab brushes as I go. But I'll do my best to kind of illustrate that stuff. All right, so let's go ahead and import our... Let's jump to the desktop. We'll go to that beach rock tutorial, full sail demo, and let's start with our sculpt frame. I'm going to bring that in. We can just import mats as polygroups. That's fine. Now I'm going to select somewhere else, go up to import, and I'm going to bring in my sculpt plane. Okay, so let's go back to our sculpt frame and let's append our plane. So it's very important to do it in this order, because when we turn on symmetry, or rather wrap mode, we want to make sure that wrap mode is based off of the dimensions of this sculpt frame. This is going to dictate where we are sculpting. So make sure import that frame first, then import the plane, and then append the plane to the frame in that order. All right, so let's append. Bring in that plane. There we go. This all works. Now, what we can do to test this and make sure this thing works is we can select our plane. Let's go ahead and just go to geometry, turn smooth off, and I'm just going to divide this up to like 2 million. 9 million might be a little high. Now let's do BST, and we'll type in the standard brush. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go up here to wrap mode. If you're not familiar where that setting is, I think it's under brush, or it could be under stroke. I can't remember exactly. Maybe it's modifiers. It's one of these. But if you're not able to find it or you don't know where it is right away, just go ahead and search that up. But since I have wrap mode off, nothing's going to happen. Let's change it to 1. Now, if I start sculpting, you're going to see that it's tiling across. So sculpt top bottom. I like to check this out really quick before we start making anything. So I'm going to go to my document, turn it to 1024. 1024. This is going to be our working resolution. We're not going to render anything out at this resolution because we're probably going to bump it up to 2 or even 4K if you're working on it on your own. That's up to you. But we're going to go ahead and hit resize. Okay. We'll hit Control N. Bring this in. I'll zoom out a little bit and grab that frame. And all we got to do is hit F. Now, something that's important, make sure we have dynamic perspective turned off. I'm also going to turn off shadows. So if I go under render, I believe render, no, not BPR. It's probably just under one of these other settings, render properties, shadows. There we go. So make sure to turn that off when you're rendering things because we don't want any of those extra artifacts. Now let's click on the plane, hide the frame. Let's hit the T key, switch to 2.5D, and we can hold down tilde. Yes, tilde. And if we drag that around, we can see this texture tiles perfectly. We'll be using this frequently, so remember that setup. All right, now that we have this sculpt plane and frame, we can just save this out as a subtool. You can use this over and over. Just try to remember not to save over it on accident. So let's do full sail demo, sculpt plane frame, and we'll just name this one sculpt plane frame. And that's pretty much it for this sculpt plane frame for now. We'll jump back to this later. Now, again, if you load tool, you can just load that up and it'll come in exactly how you need it. You could even put this in your Z startup folder. That way you can reuse it over and over and over. All right, so let's go ahead and start sculpting our rocks. So let's see, let's just open up our river rocks and take a quick gander at them. So we'll go to our beach rock. I'm going to go to ZBrush, beach rock large, and I'm just going to check out that sculpt frame setup. Now this is pretty much what I'm going to be making and how I'm going to be tiling this, right? So all I'm going to be doing is just creating these rocks and then tiling them on my little canvas here. So let's open up one more. I'm just going to open up this finished one so you can see the rocks that I made. So these are the ones. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. You can see I have all my rocks here at 0 to 1. I'm just going to sculpt 2 of these with you guys quickly because this can be a little bit time consuming and I don't want to spend the whole time sculpting these rocks because we only have 2 hours. So let's keep moving. All right. So how do we make these rocks? There's a lot of different ways that we can sculpt this. There's probably about 1,000 different ways we could go into making these, but what I like to do is just pick a couple that I like. I think I sculpted, it's 12 here. You probably don't need that many, honestly. You can get away with just moving, scaling, rotating these things, so you don't have to go and do every single one, but that's how I roll. So I always do a little bit above and beyond, just because I like having all that variety. So if we check out this reference, you can see these are some of the shapes that we get. We get some really interesting little, like for instance, this is, if I make this rock, it looks really ridiculous and it's not something that maybe we necessarily would believe, but you know, that's what it looks like. So pay close attention to the overall shape. We're going to start with that, and then we'll be moving down from large, medium, small when it comes to the detail. So for this one, large is going to be that overall shape. Medium detail is going to be like these big divots, any of these larger shaping details, or rather these larger like pocks. And then the small scale detail is going to be, if we zoom into something like, this is why I have this one as a reference. The small scale detail is going to be this stuff really up close. So let's go ahead and get started on sculpting this. I'll have my reference handy, so we'll just pick like 2 rocks or whatever and start sculpting these guys. So I'm going to pick a fresh subtool, and let's go ahead and start with a sphere. So I like to start with a sphere as it is a fairly handy shape. Obviously rocks are, well, circular or in some form of that shape. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and hit Make Polymesh 3D. And what we got to do first is just subdivide this thing up maybe once or twice. This is probably enough. Let's delete lower. And I'm just going to go ahead and turn on Dynamesh now. So something to remember with Dynamesh is that as you can see up here, these active points, this is going really high up there. For these rocks, we really don't need to go above like 600,000. We're going to be decimating these down so we can duplicate probably 100 or 200 of these on a canvas. So we want to keep these manageable. We'll sculpt them up to like 600, and then we'll come back down to something like, I don't know, 60,000, 70,000, 80,000, somewhere around there. Because if we duplicate 100 of them and they're at 60,000, you can see how that adds up quick. So we'll want to be careful with that. All right, let's go ahead and get started on the sculpt. We could Z back. Let's just start at a lower level. I'm going to use my Move Topological brush. You could use Move or Move Topological. Either one works. I'm just going to start pulling some shapes. This is already kind of like that eggy oblong shape. I think it probably works. We could just go with this if we wanted to, but I'll just give some extra interesting shape to it. You know what we could do? We could zero that out. Again, remember, we always want to try and keep these rocks facing the front too. So we have our front face, always try to be working in that as we go around and around and around. So this is a fun shape. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to B, and I'm going to type in C, and we're going to go find a brush called Crumple. So Crumple, I'm going to turn off RGB. If you look at Crumple by default, it just kind of gives us like this aging rough detail, and that's really all I want to do. I want to give it a little bit of shape with this brush really quickly. So this is where we can probably turn on Dynamesh after we do it. So let's do that quick. I'm just gonna kind of beat away at this quickly. We can rotate around, do it again, rotate around. You can hold down Alt if you want to do the opposite direction. This is probably enough. I don't need to go too crazy. Now if I hit B, T, I can go over our Trim Dynamic brush. Now this is where I can use this brush to kind of quickly soften and make these more irregular shapes almost. But let's go ahead and Dynamesh this thing first. So now we're up to like 130,000. This works for me. Let's see if we smooth it, we start getting that nice softer shape. I might bring the focal shift down, and we can just nicely kind of smooth this out. So let's switch over to a different material that's a little easier on the eyes. I'm going to go ahead and move and rotate around this one. Something you're going to see me doing a lot is, well, talking to you guys about large, medium, small detail and making sure you follow it in that order. But also switching between these materials. I like to use the normal matte material quite a bit. It helps me visualize what this is going to look like in the end. So let's just soften this out. You can always use the smooth brush if you want, but we just need to get some like organic shaping detail. We don't want to go too hard. I'm just lightly tapping on this and kind of beating away at it. So you can see how I'm getting some of these softer shapes. Again, this isn't going to be that important because we're going to hide it with some of this noise that we're going to add here shortly. So let's keep going. Just kind of sculpt away. Again, don't press too hard. Kind of just get little pockets where it feels like it's hammered away a little bit or softer, what have you. And again, if you want to smooth it out, just hold down that shift key and you can smooth that as you go. So here we go, here we go. All right, this is probably more than enough. I'm pretty happy with that. Let's go ahead and Dynamesh it again. I might bring in some resolution because the next couple things we're going to be doing is going to need a little bit more res. So we might have to sculpt on it for a second. 724 is a little bit high, so let's do like 350. Bring that up. 480. I want it to be at like 500 or 600, so let's do like 425. There we go. So I just can't get the right in the middle. So let's try 400. Perfect, 622, good enough for me. So again, I don't really need to go any higher than this. So remember that while you're kind of sculpting away. All right, so the next thing, if you have any other imperfections like that, you can just sculpt them away quick. Now that we have this, we can go ahead and just quickly decide what the next thing we want to do is. Do we want to add more detail? Do we want to sculpt in any of these large shapes? If you want to sculpt in some of these large divots, now's the time. A brush that I like to use for that is Dam Standard. So hit B and D, and then you'll get Dam Standard, and you can kind of go in at a larger scale. If you turn on Lazy Mouse and sculpt slowly, you can kind of get rid of those little dots, if you saw that there. So you can do stuff like this. If you want to sculpt pocks, another thing that's handy, if you want to do like larger pocks, something you can do is grab the standard brush, so BST, and grab the drag rect. And just with a soft alpha, you can try it with this one with the smaller size. That doesn't work, so let's try a different alpha. Let's do like this really small one. See that? That works pretty well. It feels like a pock after I smooth it out. So I'll just leave it at this because we're gonna tackle those pocks in a little bit different process. So let's jump over to the noise panel, or rather surface. Sorry, surface noise. That's what we want. So if I drag this over, this one's a little bit hard to see. Maybe I'll grab my mouse. I guess we can't drag it over. Let's up the noise scale. So what I like to do is go from large to small. So I'm going to start with like a larger noise. Now let's grab those curves. And you can kind of go through and see what they do. Let's grab, maybe I pull this one down. We can grab this one, pull it up. You can just start playing with what shapes we start getting out of here. Kind of like that. Let's bring this one down. This is not always perfect when I'm doing a live demo, but you can just play with these settings until you get something you like. So we're just trying to find something that works. What could we do? Kind of like that. If we grab another point, we can always kind of mess with this until we get something we really like. Okay, that's kind of interesting. Let's just hit OK. I think this is good enough. Remember, you can mess with that scale. I want to do something like this. This is a little bit on the larger side. This works for me. So I'm going to hit OK. I like this. what we can do is we can add a layer before we bake this on. So we'll go back to surface and we'll hit apply to mesh. So now you can see it's applied there nicely. So let's jump back to our noise. And if we like this one, what we can do is we can just hit save. Now that we have that, we can just save something like large POC noise. You can see I already have some of these ones in here. So I'm not going to save it just because I already have one. But let's open one and see what it looks like. So we have the large POC noise, and let's see the difference. So you can see I am scaling this quite a bit differently here to get these large POCs. So let's cancel. Let's just open that one up and see what we get. So we'll open it again. Here's my large POC noise. I'm going to hit OK. So now we have this applied to our mesh. Hit apply. And again, I would save that out. And then you can control its strength if you have it on a layer. I'm not going to put it on a layer because I'm just going to kind of go with it. But let's do like a second round of damage. So the next thing we could do very easily is just jump over to, we can jump over to the surface tab, noise, edit. We can do open, we can do large rocks, horizontal. So this is kind of an interesting one if you want to add in some like horizontal tiling noise. Hit OK, apply to mesh. So those are kind of nice and light. I'm gonna go ahead and show you how I did that. Basically all you need to do is kind of mess with these little scale settings down here at the bottom. It's pretty handy. All right, let's add a little bit more noise. So noise, let's do noise, edit, and we're gonna open a small scale one. So let's do the small POC noise. As you can see here, I'm just messing with the scale here. I'm just bringing it down to something like this. Hit OK. So now we have these little POCs. I'm going to hit apply to mesh. And I'm pretty happy with this. This looks pretty good. I think those large POCs might be a little bit strong. I could soften them out. I could kind of polish or whatever I need to do to get those to work. But I think this works really well. So this is kind of the process I use to sculpt a rock. And I do this every single time for smooth rocks like this. So if we wanted to quickly sculpt another one, I'm just going to go to append, sphere. Let's jump over to that sphere. Let's go, it should be already made into a polymesh 3D. Yes, it is. One other thing before we go too far is I'm going to center this pivot. Hold down, so if you move this around here, you can hold down Alt, center pivot, and then set it to home. Okay, so let's bring this guy. Let's go ahead and just dynamesh it. Bring it up to like 40,000. We'll grab the move tool, do that same thing. Again, we just want to consult our reference. Maybe we make something that's a little more elongated, has a little flatter top, something like this. I don't know. You can just go in and quickly make some interesting shapes. So it's all about just consulting with that reference, bouncing back and forth, finding shapes you like. I kind of like that. So I'm just going to go BD, damn standard. I'm going to make, I saw a detail that I really liked in this other shape, and it was kind of like this little half smile coming in. You can do those little details here and there. Okay, pretty happy with that. Again, we're going to use that crumple brush. So BCR, let's grab crumple. Let's zone out. And again, crumple is just to kind of give us this organic shaping. It may not seem like it's doing a ton, but it really is adding quite a bit of like shape and subtle language. If you look at this little silhouette over here, that's what it's all about. Just comparing how can you get a little bit of breakup in there. You don't need to do too much. These are simple, you know, they are simple kind of like large shapes, but that should be good enough. So let's go ahead and dynamesh that up, probably to 400 again. There we go. So I might just do a quick smooth BT and grab our trim dynamic. I might go a little bit faster on this one just to kind of illustrate a point. Don't have to go too crazy with this. Again, we're going to hide some of this bouncy, chunky detail. Might actually work for us. Might actually work really nicely with how this kind of thing is shaped. So it is a rock. It is smooth. The ocean beats away at it. It's kind of rounded out from it's getting eroded by the water or the sun or whatever it might be. So it does have a softer shape, but there's still kind of a hard, like we know that the surface is rough, or rather we know the surface is tough. It's not a weak thing, right? So it's nice to have some of these hammered details. Sometimes you might have like dents or chips or whatever from it bouncing around on other rocks in the ocean, as you could probably imagine it would. So let's bring this thing to the front. Just sculpt away, good enough. So we'll do the same process. I'm happy with that. You can up-res it if you need it to be higher. It's at 719, so that's good enough for me. And let's go ahead and add in that noise. All right, so we'll jump down to the surface tab, noise, open, rinse and repeat. We can always do Z offset, that way that changes the position a little bit. If I don't like how strong that is, I can just mess with the strength, 0.06, something like that, hit OK. So that might be a little strong still, but whatever. This one I'm not going to do the horizontal noise, I don't want it on every single one. So I'm just going to do small. You could do another round of medium. So for instance, I have a round of medium right here. So let's grab the medium, see what it looks like, hit OK. Oh, I guess, did we not hit, must have not hit apply to mesh on the previous one. Hit OK. We'll just hit apply, whatever. Okay, so we'll do the same thing, grab the medium pock noise, hit OK, apply to mesh, and do the same thing, edit. So again, it's a little repetitive, but it is a foolproof way to make this stuff. So there we go, we have another rock. I want a little bit of noise in there, a little bit of strength. I might add a little bit in substance later, but this is a pretty good look for me. I'm happy with what we have. So typically from here, I would just go in and sculpt a bunch more. We have plenty of rocks to work with and shapes that we can look at. I'm not going to go through and sculpt every single one of them. I just wanted to show you guys quickly how to sculpt like 2 of them. You can make 8, 10, 12 of them. I think I made 12 of them. It's up to you. The more you make, the more variation you have. But be sure to kind of balance your time against that. So the next thing we're going to do is after we sculpt those 12 more, and we're just going to open up the file so we can look at it quick. We're just going to go ahead and decimate these rocks down. So again, something that's important that we want to keep doing is making sure we have these things centered at world origin. So again, if I click on and unhide both of these, I'm going to make sure my pivot is centered, send it to the home, click on the other one, center pivot, send it home. I want these perfectly right here. If we need to look at them, we can just hit this expose button. It's a little slow, but that's okay. And that's about it for sculpting these rocks. So let's go ahead and open up our finished sculpt, because again, I don't really want to sculpt all these from scratch. So again, let's go to load tool, and we're going to jump down here to my rocks finished. Open that up. You can see here I have my 12 rocks. I'm going to hit that expose button. If you look closely, these are all centered at origin. If you ever need to look and see where the ground plane is, you can just turn on the floor. So you can see there's the Y. So it's nice and centered here. This works fine. Turn that off. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about decimating these things. So again, we aren't going to be able to sculpt or to work with these at 500,000 or 600,000 each. We need to get these down to like between 60 and probably 80 or 90,000. We don't need to be any higher than that. We might even make a version where we decimate them down even lower. So let's go ahead and do that quickly. I'm just going to do one rock, and then I'll show you how you can do all of them at once. So if I just quickly go to Z plugin, Decimation Master, we're just going to go to pre-process current. If I hit pre-process all, it's going to pre-process all of the visible subtools. I'm just going to do this one for now, but we'll hit pre-process current, let it do its thing. It sometimes can take a little bit longer if it's a pretty heavy mesh, obviously, so just be wary of that. That's done. We can go to Z plugin, decimate down. Okay, that's still too high. I want to bring it to like 10. So decimate current. 65, that's probably good. I could, I don't feel like my detail's getting nuked if I go into normal map mode and Z back. So this is it full res. If I Z forward, this is it at 125, and this is it at 65. So you can see it starts to lose a little bit of quality, but this is about where it starts dropping down. So what if we bring this to like 7? decimate current. Okay, that's where I can see it's starting to get a little blocky. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but we'll probably split the difference. Let's just stay at 65. So this is good. This is what I want. The next thing I'm going to do is just go ahead and do it for all of them. So I'm not going to do this with you guys live, but what I would do is just Z back. I found the nice spot. As long as these rocks are all relatively close in polygons, you might, to be safe, go through them one at a time, like this one, for instance. But I believe this rock is a little bit smaller. Yeah, so this rock's a little bit smaller, so it's probably the same density. It's just a little bit smaller. So the polygon, when you're dynameshing it, it's based on size, so it kind of adjusts there. With that, all I'm going to do, again, Z plugin, preprocess all, and then decimate down to that 7%. That was the sweet spot. Once you do that, we can just load up our tool, and we'll have our decimated rocks. So you can see here, if I bring all these guys back, expose them, this is all my rocks. Let's see, there's a couple right around 60,000. All of them are right around 60,000. I think this one might be 49 and this one's 54. These ones are smaller. So you can see why I did that. Save as, make sure you're saving the stuff as you go. As you can see, I have 4 versions. Save that decimated version, because that is exactly what we're going to be using. I'm going to load up the decimated finished. It's the exact same thing. I just saved off a copy because I don't want to accidentally ever save over this. Now we're going to be using this one to start our sculpt. So let's go ahead and jump into kind of part 2 of this ZBrush demo. This part is a little bit more time consuming. I rushed through this a little bit just because I don't think this is nearly as exciting as some of the more fun substance stuff. So let's go ahead and jump into that. Now that I have this, I'm just going to bring them all back. Again, make sure those are all centered where you want them with your pivots in a nice place. So if you click through here, make sure those pivots are where they need to be. It's super important. All right, so let's go ahead and start with the process of our tile texture. Now, how can we do that? We have this set of rocks. What I'm going to do is I'm going to save as, and I'm going to jump into my tile texture. Now you can see I have my tiling texture set up, start. So what I'll do is I'm just going to go with beach. Let's start with full sail. That's us. Sail, beach, rock, tiling, texture, start. And what we're going to need to do is append our sculpt plane and frame in. So we could probably just do a quick, let's just, since we have this one open, let's just append this in there. So I'm going to grab my frame first. Remember, we want to start with that. So we're going to go append, grab that frame. So that frame is somewhere. If we zoom out, we found it. Now let's go ahead and grab, let's append in our sculpt plane. I believe it's just this polyplane one right here. So we'll bring that in, or maybe not. Might have to find that one. It probably is that one. We probably just scaled it differently. So I'm just gonna delete these. Okay, delete. Okay. You know what would probably be easier? Let's just load up. Let's just load up that. Let's jump all the way back to our full sail demo, sculpt plane frame. Let's just load this up. This is going to be easier to do. See, we have this wonderful, let's see back, there we go. So we'll save as, and we'll just save over that because we don't want to have that piece. So what we can do now instead, I'm just going to go to my Polymesh 3D. This is my finished scene, unexpose them. I'm just going to go ahead and go to merge. So subtool, we'll go to merge, merge visible. So that's all merged together. There's a poly group down here, or rather right here. So I'm going to go back to my sculpt plane frame. Let's go find that one we were using. And I'm going to go ahead and append this in. So I'm going to append in my merged Polymesh 3D. So these are really big. We're going to scale these down. Whoops, we got to select our rocks instead. Let's make sure we have all these pieces in here. Okay, scale this down. And this is probably about good for scale. I'm pretty happy with this. And this is where I would go ahead and save as. This is why I have this kind of like reference over here. This is my scale reference. So just so you guys know, let's jump over to, where are you? It's one of these ones. Accidentally, this gets a little confusing when you have all these things open, right? Is it this one? Or is it this one? That's this one, okay. Oh, I thought it was this one. Guess it's not that one. There we go. Okay. So next thing I'm going to do is just hit save as. This is where like I would probably go in and so what we can do, let's go into preferences. Let's see. I kind of want to delete all these extra subtools. It gets kind of confusing with this in here. So I'm just going to click on a couple of these because, again, it is kind of annoying having all this stuff up here. Let's bring this down a little bit. I'll hit delete all, always okay. So we're just going to go through and just delete a couple of these. So delete all. Just want to make sure I don't delete the one that I want. So let's make sure we have our frame. Let's hit delete all. Delete all. We could probably just delete all really quickly and then go through and very easily reload this one. But now that we have this all lined up, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab these rocks. I'm just going to move them off screen, or you can leave them right here off the tiling, but I like to leave them here in the background. Switch back to our little setup. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to polygroups, auto group. And now every one of those rocks has a polygroup. And now what we can do is we can go to split, group splits, and hit OK. Now it's going to split every single one of our rocks. What I'm going to do is I like to be really tidy with this stuff. So make sure you create a couple folders when you're making these things. So I'm going to go ahead under here. Let's add our visible count up to like 15. And then let's do a new folder. And I'm going to name this Rocks Edge. Let's do another new folder, and we'll name this one, let's bring this down a little bit. We'll name this one, oops, looks like we didn't do a new folder, so new folder, or did we add in that on accident? Interesting. Okay, so new folder, and we'll do Rocks Edge. And then we're gonna do new folder. Let's do Rocks Middle. This will make a lot more sense here shortly. I'm going to drag my plane out of there, and that deletes the folder, so that's kind of annoying. Anyway, let's just go ahead and get started. So first thing I'm going to do is just go through, move these rocks. You're going to have to mess with the pivots. It's a little annoying that they don't just Z back, but that's what happens when you merge it. So we'll just move these rocks up. And we're going to set this up so we can just pull from these rocks as we start sculpting. So let's grab here, zero all these out. Whoops, let's jump back down to that one. Let's make sure we didn't move that on accident. Okay. Let's move this one down a little bit. Keep going down the line. There we go. And we will move this down. Let's grab that last one and just move it down. There we go. Okay, so we have all of our rocks kind of ready to go here. What I might do is you could move these all up so they're nice and square, but for the sake of time, let's just keep moving. The next thing I'm going to do is just show you guys how to physically make these tile. So I'm going to grab this rock here. I'm going to hit duplicate. And we're going to start with the edges. I kind of want to go around all the edges first. So I'm just going to drop this rock in here. You can see here I have this rock already under edges, right? So rock edges, this is great. So all I want to do is go down to duplicate. And we're going to go over to the deformation tab. We're going to grab this little offset button. We're going to do -100, -100. Now let's see what that did. If we did this right, this should tile perfectly. So we'll jump up to that subtools. We'll grab the frame frame that up. Let's hide our frame. And this is how we're going to be checking the tiling. So I'm going to hit T, switch, and now we'll hit tilde and kind of jump around. So that tiles nicely. If there's any seams or anything, it means it is, for whatever reason, not tiling. So you want to address that as fast as possible. Let's go ahead and keep going. So I probably would just go, I'm probably just going to go in and do a couple of these. I'm going to merge this one down. So I like to keep this, again, really, really tidy as I go. So merge down. Okay. So now these are merged. Now if we jump back over, let's grab another rock. I'm going to do the top left and right corner. I don't like that I just changed my setup, but that's okay. So if I turn the frame back on, I'm going to move this rock. Let's zoom in a little bit first. I'm going to move this rock down here to this corner. If you ever get something where you start noticing this weird stretching, this is a really annoying one. I'm not sure why it changes it. Let's Z back here. If you look at the focal shift, this needs to be set to -100 for the move tool. So if you set it to like 52, you can see it starts like mushing things. I don't know why that gets moved. It's super annoying, but sometimes you accidentally change that somehow. So I'm just going to move this rock here. We're going to start with this one. I'll recenter that. Now let's move that rock into that folder. So let's move him up. Which one are you? So we'll move up into rock edge. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly go to duplicate. Now we need to duplicate that rock to the left. So since it's on all four corners, we're going to need to tile it on all four sides, right? So what I might do before I do that, because I noticed that I, for whatever reason, didn't duplicate this rock. So let's duplicate that one again. I'm just going to move it down here, and we'll just add it back to our library. So we have two of these, right? 1, 2. I'm just going to do that same deformation process where I move it over to the left side. So move it over, 1, 2. Okay. Now I'm just going to merge these. So merge down. Okay. Now I'm going to duplicate it. Duplicate. And now we're going to have to do that same deformation process up. Once you get the hang of this, this obviously gets a lot faster. I know because I'm explaining it right now to you, it gets pretty slow. But once you get the hang of it, it really speeds up. So let's hit that X. Let's change it to Y. Let's go -100, -100. And then let's go jump up to the subtools and turn that other one on. So these should tile nicely now. Let's turn this one off. Merge down. Merge down. Okay. You can come back from that if for whatever reason you need to. So don't fret. But let's go ahead and just check that tiling one more time. Again, I like to do the borders first. That's going to be pretty easy for me to check everything as I go. So let's switch. If you ever notice it's not tiling perfectly, sometimes I have a lot of issues where I accidentally turn on dynamic perspective, and that'll break your tiling, so you don't want to do that. But this is going pretty well, pretty happy with this. So what we'll probably do, again, just to save time, we're going to skip through this a little bit because I think this is going to be a little too time consuming with this. But again, work in these groups, get that rock's edge in there, get the rock's middle in there, start with that edge, go around that frame, and that's going to help you. Another question I get is like, why do this here, not Substance Designer? Again, at this scale, it's hard for these, it's hard to get these rocks to not look like they're penetrating into each other, which is pretty frustrating to do inside of Substance Designer. It can be tough. You can do it, but it's a very painful thing to do, in my opinion. If you're handy with other programs like Houdini, or I think Blender can do it as well, you can also set up actions where it will simulate for you dropping these. I don't know how to do it. I'll be honest with you. I'm sure somebody out there does. Maybe one of you. But you can always do that. You can make your subtools, sim them. The key here, though, is that I always need these different subtools to, let's grab this guy. I need these different subtools to have different poly groups. So if I turn polyline fill off, or rather line off, I always need whatever tiling I'm doing. And the reason I start with my edge and I keep this stuff all grouped nicely is because I need to be very careful of making sure the poly groups, wherever you're tiling, are matching. because this is going to directly dictate the mask we make later, but we'll get into that. So now that we have that, let's go ahead and load up our beach rock. Let's jump down to ZBrush, beach rock large, and we already have the sculpt set up. We'll jump over to the oops, that was the wrong one. So let's jump back, beach rock tutorial, ZBrush, large, tile texture. So let's jump to 1. Now you can see with this setup, I'm just slowly tiling around. So you can see I finished up my edge. I'll probably add more rocks to that edge, but this is a good good indication of like what I need. So let's go ahead and again, if I click on these rocks, you'll see all of these have the same polygroups, and if they don't, I would go in and set them. See that? So this is something that's pretty important to go through and do. So we'll, as we go, as we're making these, you're merging them. You can auto group. So if you go down to polygroups, you can just hit auto group, and it'll add in those groups very nicely for us. So let's go ahead and, let's hit group visible. There we go. So that's probably a better way to do it. If you hit group visible, there we go. So this is something we'll save for later. As long as you keep this stuff nice and organized in these little folders, it's going to be a lot easier to do that. So again, super important for your own sanity's sake. Let's jump to number 2. Now we start filling in that middle bit. I'm always looking at this from the left, from the right. Something else I like to do to check tiling, maybe we'll go one more forward, but let's go ahead and check the tiling inside of, let's jump to 3. So let's remember we're at number 3. Oop, that's the one we already did. Let's jump to 4 rather. So we're getting a lot closer to being done once we get to 4. So there's a lot more rocks in here, right? So let's jump up, hide this group. So we have that rock underlayer. We have a bunch of rocks, and it looks like I need to go through and kind of adjust where all these rocks are and kind of put them in folders because it's getting pretty ugly, right? All right, so let's grab our frame. I'm going to hit F, frame this up, and now what I'm going to do is select the plane, and I'm going to hide this, turn polyfill off, and I'm going to jump over here, make sure shadows is turned off, and let's hit the T key, T, switch, and then we can grab the tilde key. As you can see up here, there's a problem one. There's a rock that's not tiling, so I would go in and fix this. So again, this is an example that we need to be checking that tiling all the time. Another easy way to do it, let's just frame this up one more time. Another really easy way to do this, if you don't want to constantly be checking that way, and it's even a good thing to do to just check inside of Substance Designer. So what we can do is we can just go over to our standard brush, and we can grab dock. I'm going to go ahead and hit best possible render. That's going to be under render, and we're going to hit best. So now this is going to do a little bit of anti-aliasing, make sure this render is really nice. Remember, we're working at 1K. We want to render out at 2K, but this is fine for testing. So I'm going to grab dock. There we go. Now you can see here's our height map. Let's go ahead and export that out. And we're going to export it to Beach Rock Large Tile Texture. I'm just going to do tiling test file. Okay, let's hide that. Honestly, what I might do is just close down this copy of ZBrush because I'm sick of the hundreds of tools that I have loaded in there. We can always reopen that in a second. So let's jump over to Substance Designer. And you can see here I have a bunch of stuff open already. All I'm going to do is just grab my folder. So let's jump over here. Wholesale demo, sculpt plane frame. It's not in here. I put it in my Beach Rock under ZBrush. So Beach Rock large tile texture, and we'll just bring in that tiling test link resource, and we'll probably delete that later, but this is a really easy way to quickly check what our tiling looks like. Let's bump the normal map up to like 20. That works for me. Okay, so now we can go under material. Let's adjust the tiling up to like 2. So we'll switch this to 2. Now you can see this is tiling pretty well. This is actually looking pretty good. Now if I hit spacebar here, I can start addressing any problem areas, any areas where I don't like how things are looking, right? So this is actually working pretty well. I'm happy with this, so we can just keep moving. So let's open up ZBrush again. I might have to reset my document size, but that's okay. Just got to remember to do it. And naturally, as ZBrush does, it's going to open on the screen that isn't a Cintiq first. So there we go. Let's go ahead and switch that resolution back. So we're going to do 1024 by 1024. There we go. So we're going to load tool. Let's jump down to like tile texture 5. We'll just see what the difference is. How far are we getting here? So let's zoom out, frame up. So we're starting to get a lot more rocks in here. This is starting to look pretty cool. Let's keep going. So again, we don't have to, we're just going to kind of go down the line. So we'll jump up to 7. At some point, we're going to have to start sculpting the background plane as well. We're going to need those different pieces. Here, I'm starting to add little rocks. So you can see I have 4 different folders. If you see this rock underlayer, this is where I'm kind of duplicating and moving rocks underneath these main ones. So another thing to note, if you start noticing your polygon count's getting too high, you can really, really easily reduce that by just adding or just grabbing some of these rocks that you plan to be, that are going to be in the background. Check out the poly count, see how low that is. I just took a bunch of rocks that I placed under there and I decimated them down even further. So this is a good little trick for helping yourself if you have a lot of problems with the poly count, right? So there we go. Okay, so let's keep going. Let's jump down to 9, which is going to be finished. And this is the sculpt. This is the end of the line here. So it looks pretty much the same. I'm sure there's some little adjustments in here that we might have made. If I frame this up, notice the polygon count's up around 11.25, and I sculpted that background. So all I'm doing here, I just need something in here. So all I'm really doing is I'm just grabbing like a random noise with the standard brush and using drag rect. It's pretty easy. Just, you know, drag rect some noise in there. You can turn on that wrap mode again and just drag in some noise. It doesn't have to look good. This is going to be just in the background. It's not super important. So next thing I'm going to do is I need to, you know, get ready for exporting this guy out. So let's load tool. Actually, this is the end of the line, so we're kind of good to go. So the next step that we're going to be doing is trying to get this into Substance Designer. What we need to do is, in order to bake this out and get the correct poly paint that we need, we're going to need to make sure that we have the poly group set up and that we bake it correctly. So we're going to need 3 different parts. We're going to need the background plane. We're going to need the main rocks in the middle, and then we're going to need all the rocks on the edges. So you can see here, rocks on the edges. Everything else here is just not touching. It's not hitting the tiling plane. This one is up on the top, but I'm guessing I have something like one of my rock edges is covering it up. Yeah, so I don't care about that one. It doesn't matter. Let's check on. Let's see. Is there anything else we need to do? I think this is pretty much it. These 3 groups are basically the middle. So let's go ahead and hit merge visible. So we're just going to go down to merge visible. Now this is like 11 million tries or something about like that. I hit merge visible. Now if I jump over here, you can see this whole group is merged. It's only about 6 million, so that's not so bad. Let's turn off line. Check it out. We can always hit auto groups. Remember, all of these need to be individual groups. So just hit auto group. Some of these colors might look the same, but they are slightly different in value. I promise you that. Now let's jump back to, actually what we can do is we can just export this now. So let's go ahead and hit export, and we're going to jump over to our desktop, Beach Rock, Full Sail Demo, and let's do folder, Substance Designer, Bake. So let's hit that. Substance Designer Bake. I'm going to open this guy up, and I'm going to name this one Beach Rock. We'll just Control C, so we have to type that every time. Middle. Hit OK. Let it do its thing. This can take a little bit of time from here and there, so let's just kind of let it write out that OBJ. It is a lot of polygons, so it can be a little time consuming. So hopefully you guys aren't falling asleep out there while this does this. But I promise you, the fun part is next. So we'll try to speed a little bit through the next little chunk, and we'll keep moving. So we're getting close. Let it keep doing its wonderful export. How are you guys feeling? If you're wondering, this is me faking like I'm practicing my live demo. So if you're listening out there, I'm sure you'll enjoy this. Give it a second, a couple more seconds. We'll just let it do its thing. Probably chop this up. Not sure how long this actually takes. There we go. Didn't actually have to stop it at all. So that's looking good. Let's go ahead and make sure that we export that out. All right, so that one's exported. Let's jump back to our groups. So let's turn this one off. And let's open up the edges. So this one needs to be set to, again, remember you need to go through each one of these and make sure these are grouped visible so they all match, right? So once we've done that, once we make sure every single one of them is set and good, we just hit merge visible. So merge visible, and we'll do the same thing. So we'll export that out, export. And of course, it didn't take us to the right spot, so we'll jump over there. Beach rock edge. There we go. This works pretty well. Give it a second while we bake this out. This one should hopefully be a little bit faster. Okay, this works. Let's go ahead and jump back, and we'll do the final thing, which is going to be our plane. So we can just export this straight up. And again, for whatever reason, it does not remember where we were. So here we go, beach rock, edge. Let's do beach rock, sand, or sculpt plane, or whatever, sand. That's good. And the last thing that we need to do is make sure that we have an option for what we're going to be baking with. So let's go ahead, let's close down ZBrush. We can reopen that later. Don't need it right now. So we're going to go ahead and get this thing started. So I'm going to delete this out. We're going to delete here, remove this one, and let's go ahead and get started. All right, so I want to grab you, move you over here so I can take a look as we go, just to make sure I don't miss anything. Let me rearrange real quick. All right, so what I need to do first is start baking out these maps. So I need to start by, let's go to our unbaked one. There we go. So I need to bake out these mesh maps first. We need to add in some resources. So let's go ahead and link some resources. So I'm going to right click, link 3D scene. We're going to jump over to our beach rock tutorial. Whoops. Whoops, my bad. We're on the E drive again. Let's go to Full Sail Demo, Substance Designer, Bake. I'm going to grab these three and open. So that's going to bring all of these in here really quickly. And the only other thing, we don't need a plane, we need to get a bake plane. So let's import our original bake plane. So we're just going to link 3D scene, and we're going to jump over to our beach rock tutorial, and we have this Full Sail Demo sculpt plane frame. I'm just going to grab the plane. You can just use this again. No, I don't want UDIM, stop asking. Now we can go ahead and just hit, we might rename this quick. So we'll name this beach rock. Just name this beach rock, and then it will finish the names for us. So let's go ahead and right click, bake model information, and let's pull this over. So I need to make a couple different things. Remember, when you're baking this, whatever file size we're working at, you need to make sure you stay at that file size, because it can become quite a headache if you don't. So we're going to bake at 2K, and we're going to be working at 2K. If you bake at 2K and then you're working at 4K, there's going to be some aliasing issues with your bake. Things aren't sharp. I wouldn't recommend it. So if you're going to work at 4K, bake at 4K. If you're going to work at 2K, bake at 2K. This is just a good rule of thumb. So what we need to do first is bake our color map. This is going to be our mask. So this is why we have all those polygroups and whatnot. So I'm going to grab a color map from Mesh. And what we're going to do is we're going to make sure we turn off dilation. Don't want that. I'm going to turn off diffusion. For the frontal distance, I'm just going to set this to 1. And then I'm going to set the rear value to like -0.5. Or rather 0. Or rather, sorry, I want to set it to 0.5 because it's just going backwards and forwards. So this is how far the rays shoot out front and back. Now that we have that set up, I can set my super sampling for my aliasing to 2. I don't want actually any for my color map. So let's name this color random. Hit OK. I'm going to add a baker. So we're going to add in a height map from Mesh. That's going to be our next one. So height map, we can do, I'm not actually going to change anything. This is more than fine. Something I do want to change for the color random is material color, mesh ID polygroup. I'm just going to switch this one to, let's try random first and see what we get. We might have to do the other one, but let's add files from resource. We're going to grab our edge, middle, and sand, all of them, hit OK. And this should be just about everything we need. Let me double check. Let's just hit start render. We can always re-render if we need it. Let it do its thing. It might take a little bit. So it looks like nothing baked, so we must have missed something. Let's jump back over to ZBrush. If this happens, what I like to do is just open up my, let's open up a file from our, whoops, wrong one. Beach Rock Large, tile texture, and let's go to the tiling texture. Let's see, let's just go to start. Drag this out, T. Oh, looks like we don't have our plane in that one. Let's grab the other one. Let's try this one. There we go. So I'm just going to export this plane out and use this as our bake file. So let's jump back to the desktop. Sometimes this can happen. It's a little irritating. I must have moved the plane or something happened, or maybe the UVs are broken. I don't know what. So let's go check. Substance Designer bake. So let's jump here. I'm just going to do beach, rock, bake, plane. Merging UV chords. Oh, that's a really high polygon. Let's exit that. Let's go down to, let's bring that all the way down to 49 and delete higher. There we go. This will be a lot easier. Export. So we'll do that one more time. Again, it would be really nice if this would just remember where I'm saving this stuff, because I've done it like 5 times now. There we go. Okay, so we'll hide that. Let's try this again. Let's go ahead and hit cancel, close. And I'm going to remove this plane because I don't feel like it's working for me. So let's just go in here, link, 3D scene, and we'll jump to full sail demo, bake plane. Yes, and we can grab that bake plane. What we could do is just drag it in the 3D viewport. I wonder if we can drag in another one and see if it's matched up. I think it's close, so let's find out. Let's go ahead and just do a quick bake model information. I'm just going to do an add baker, color map from mesh. Let's select our resources from these 3. There we go. Hit OK. I'm going to bring that frontal value up to like 0.5 again. And we'll bring the rear value to like 1, something like that. I just want to make sure, let's do random color, just name it quick. Hit start render. Want to double check and make sure that this is actually baking correctly. Okay, so I just forgot to do, I just forgot to switch it to mesh ID. So that was an easy fix. Let's do random again. Let's bake it, see what we get. This should work, hopefully. There we go. That's much better. Okay, let's rebake that. Let's make sure we get rid of dilation. Let's get rid of that. Let's see. All this stuff looks good. I don't really care. I'm going to bring this up to like 0.1. I don't really care. For safety's sake, let's bring it up to like 0.3. Why not? I don't need to change too many other settings, I think. Yeah, everything looks good. So let's add in that height map because we're definitely going to need our height map too. So let's go ahead and do add baker, height map from mesh. So here's our height map. We'll just name it height. And then dilation off. Everything else is set as it should be. Let's hit start render. So we'll get our height map, and it already baked out our render, or our background color, so that's great. Now if we zoom out, you can see both of those are saved over there. From here, all I need to do is I need to hide these two, and I'm going to get rid of my beach rock sand, so we'll delete that. And all I'm going to do is add a new baker, and we're going to call it opacity mask from mesh. And that's pretty much all you have to do. There's nothing else we have to do. So hit start render. That'll bake pretty quick. And it's going to give us a black and white mask that will dictate the difference with our dirt and so on. So with that, we can go ahead and start working. So let's close this. Let's go ahead and drag these three in. Before I go too far, I'm just going to remove these. Yes. So I'm going to drag all three of these in. What I like to do right away is just set up portals. First thing I'm going to do is invert this. So this one's invert. Here's the mask to our rocks. Here's our height map. We're going to hit an auto levels for that right away. So we have the full range for our auto levels. And for the bitmap, we're going to do something a little special for that one. Let's drag that on top. And let's grab it and type in RGBA split. So now we effectively have a multi-value grayscale. When you jump in here and you start color sampling, if I hit this little eye, I can see the V down here. If you can see my cursor, V is 219, 220, 191, 189. You can see these values are slightly different. And this is going to allow me to select and merge these really nicely. So if ever there's any bake issues, we can always adjust that. But this is exactly the setup that we're going to make. So I'm going to bring this up. I'm going to grab this first R. I'm going to hit space, click in dot, and let's bring in a dot node. And what we're going to do is we're going to name this random color A. Hit OK. I'm just going to hit Control C, Control V. And these are really important to set up now. This will save us a lot of time later. So B. If you're not familiar with what portals are, this is basically going to be a when you think about it, it's a portal. So we have this entrance, and when we plug something into another node, we can just select a new dot node and say plug into here. So let's plug this one in, and we'll name this one C. Hit OK. There we go. So I'm good with this. This is all I need for these. We can start kind of kicking this one out. So for the dirt mask, next thing we can do is create a portal for this one. So we'll do another dot node. Okay, there's our dot, and we'll switch this to, we'll say this is dirt mask. Perfect. That works. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to start adding a little bit of detail to our height map. So I'm pretty happy with what we got right now. Let's go ahead and set up our height map into our normal. So let's switch our scene back to a rounded cube. This is one of my favorites. And we'll just right click, view outputs in 3D view. So now you can see we have this. I'm going to go ahead and save as, and make sure to save this somewhere that's helpful for us. So Beach Rock tutorial, desktop Beach Rock tutorial. Let's do full sail demo, new folder, and we'll do substance bake, or rather substance files. And I'm just going to click in here, and we'll do large beach rock. That works for me. Perfect. So I like to use something a little different for my height maps. I like to use the height to world units, height to normal world units, and this one works really nicely for me. So what I'm going to do is set this to 350. So it's about 350, something like that. And we'll set the height depth to like 40. And that's going to give us a nice little look at what these rocks are really scaled like. So that works pretty well. We'll go with that for now. We can delete this. And let's go ahead and plug in our ambient occlusion. So we're going to use an ambient occlusion RTAO. And we're just going to match those values to the normal. So we'll go up to use physical units, true. I'm going to set these to 350, Control A, 350, tab 350, and we'll set this to 40. So now we have a nice looking map. I'll bring the samples up a little bit, and otherwise I think this looks pretty good. So we'll plug this in. Now we have a nice AO going on. We can continue to push that. Let's plug in our height. There we go. We can always go up to our material and adjust this accordingly. So this works pretty well. I dig what we have. Let's bring the height scale up to like 10. It might be a little high. Bring the tessellation up. I like to work with a little bit of extra tiling as well, so I'm just going to set this like 1.2. It's a little disappointing when you scale that back down and you see your texture doesn't tile as much, but whatever. That's okay. It doesn't need to. So this is good. I like what we have here. So right click, hit save, and this is the beginning of our texture. So let's go ahead and start with our height map. We're going to need to move a lot of things back, as this can be a kind of time-consuming little process. Something I also might do is create a couple more dot nodes. Let's go ahead and let's just finish our height map first, and then we'll kind of link that up. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to go ahead and start adding some extra detail in here. I'm just going to grab a, let's say, grunge shavings. Why not? And let's plug this into a histogram scan. What I want to do is I want to add some like more POC detail. So histogram scan, let's set it to, let's crunch the values and set it to like 0.15 maybe. Yeah, I like that. That works. Now let's directionally warp this by some height map. So we'll plug this into the top, grab that intensity bottom, and we're just going to set this to something really high, like 200. Something like that could work. We'll bring this over. If we zoom out, we'll get rid of that. You can see this is starting to form around our rocks. This is a really handy trick that I always use when I'm breaking up noise. Make sure you're warping it by your height map. This really helps break up that stuff. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and grab an ambient occlusion. We can just use a regular HBAO. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little something interesting where I erode these. So I'm going to grab an invert. There we go. So we have that inverted. Now what we can do is we can grab a non-uniform blur scale, non-uniform blur grayscale. Non-uniform blur scale. That works perfect as well. Let's plug that into the bottom. And let's plug that directional warp into the top. So now you can see you're starting to get like a little halo around it, a little kind of like budding or budging, something like that. Let's increase or decrease the value down to like 3. We don't need to do too much with that, and we could change the angle. Doesn't really matter right now. I'll just move it for now. The next thing I'm going to do is go ahead and plug this in. So I'm going to go to a blend mode, subtract. Let's set that to subtract. So that means anything that's using a brighter value is going to eat into that. So let's set this to something low, like 0.1 for now. Let's plug in this height map in the bottom. Now let's see what happens. Okay, way too strong. So 0.05 maybe. Yeah, that's kind of cool. Might want to bring it down even more, but whatever, it kind of works. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to utilize our awesome little dot node. So let's grab a dot. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this to one of my random grayscales. Now you can see this works as a mask now. Now if we use a histogram scan, we can really easily just bring this up to, let's add the contrast up. Let's bring it up to like 0.1. Now you can see it's only affecting a couple rocks. So this works in my favor. 0.08, that works just fine. I like that quite a bit. So I'm just going to kind of rinse and repeat the same exact process, right? So this works, and I like the outcomes. I just want to add in a small, medium, and large variation to this. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and just Control-C, Control-V the whole thing. So we'll move this over, plug this into the bottom of the blend node, and we're going to drag holding Shift right click and update that. So now you can see it basically just grabbed a bunch of, it just doubled up the strength. So what I want to do instead is I'm going to grab a new mask. So let's do mask B. And let's set the histogram scan to something much higher. So we can do something like this. Maybe reduce the overall contrast. I might bring it up a little bit so we get a few more. Maybe the position, something like that. This could work. I like this. Let's go ahead and see how this works. Now you can see it's all blending in there, but I don't want to do these large shapes again. What I'm going to do is use Gaussian spots. And this is just one of those ones, one of these spots nodes that we can just really easily dictate it and how strong it is, right? So let's plug that into the histogram scan. Now you can see we're starting to get those smaller pox all over. As you can see them here, I like that. We can always move or adjust the histogram scan if we want to add more or less, but I like what we have here. So that works for me. Again, we can adjust this as much as we want. Let's do a directional warp. Let's change this down to like 15. It's pretty strong right now. So let's see what we're getting. I don't not like that. I think it works. We can do something like that. I think our histogram scan might be a little bit too strong right here. So let's add in a little bit more. Maybe the contrast is just a little too high, probably. So that works. There we go. We're definitely getting a lot more now. Let's bring that down a little bit. That feels pretty good. I like the settings that we have here. This works too for me. We can always increase the strength if we want, but it's kind of up to you how kind of crazy you want to go with this. This works pretty well. You can adjust the depth of the HBAO if you want to add more or less strength. As you can see, kind of mess with that. This works for me. I dig this. Okay, so let's do a much smaller version of this. So we're just going to rinse and repeat the exact same process. Plug this in and drag and drop our entire graph over here. So this one, I'm just going to I'm going to get rid of this node. I don't want to use this. I want it to happen on all of them. But we're going to use a more high frequency detail. So let's use clouds 2. Or rather, let's try B&W spots. B&W spots 2 is like one of my favorite nodes when it comes to high frequency detail, especially for like rocky detail. So let's just plug that directly into our directional warp, or plug it directly into our directional warp. I like that. That works pretty good. Let's increase the strength up a little bit. So that's like warping it around our rock. See that? So that's helping quite a bit. This HBAO node is very, very strong. So maybe if we bring this down, bring it to like 0.05. How about 0.01? Something like that could work. Non-uniform blur is probably too high. Let's change this to, whoops, 0. See what we get. See how it's much sharper now? Let's go ahead and switch the subtract to like 0.01. It's very strong right here. There we go. I like that. So we're getting that nice detail in there. That's working pretty well for me. Let's see. What can we do? Let's just increase this a little bit. So let's bring it up to like 2. That's going to soften those shapes up quite a bit. What if we do 3? That works. I like that. Okay. So this is probably just about enough detail that I need in my base. I do think that this one's still a bit strong. 0.025. Or maybe not that one. The first one I think is a bit too strong. 0.03. Let's try 1.5. There we go. Something like that works, I think. All right, so I like this. Let's maybe add like a random mask to this. So let's do this to clouds 2. Plug that in. So now if we zoom in, you can do the before and after. You can see it's a little stronger, a little weaker here and there. I do still feel like some of these damages are a little too strong. So maybe if we bring this down to like 0.3. Whoops, 3. Bring it down to like 0.2. There we go. That reads pretty good. I like that. Okay, so this is probably it for my height map. Let's go ahead and bring this out. I'm going to now create a portal for my final height map. This works pretty well using these portal setups. As you can see, here's the connections, but then we don't have to look at the strings because that's always pretty awful. So let's go ahead and just quickly do one more. So let's make a dot node. And let's name this final, let's name this like final height. Something like that, final height. And we'll switch this one to a, let's switch it to color C. Or rather, well, this is a new one. Sorry, I'm a little confused on that one. We want to keep that as final height. It's its own. It's a new one. So let's grab everything it's plugged into. Let's make a new node. Control C, Control V. We'll get rid of the name on this one. We don't need it. And then we're just going to set it to use that final height. There we go. So Control C, Control V, Control C, Control V, and we'll plug that in. We don't have to plug it in there, but you know, it's a nice little setting. So now all this stuff is nicely organized. So let's just add a frame around here. Right click, add frame, and we're gonna do something like purple. That's fine. Let's organize our bakes a little bit. So we'll move this out. This is good. Let's just do a quick add frame, and we can do, these are our bakes. That way it's always nice and organized. So let's save. All right, let's keep going. Let's do kind of the fun part. It's not necessarily the easy part, but it's definitely the fun part. The base color. So we're going to need a lot of extra room here. Base color is kind of a tricky one. Let's go ahead, and we could also make a portal if we wanted to for this height map here. We could definitely do that if we wanted to. You know what we could do instead? We could just use, instead of reusing these height maps all to keep blending between these, we could just instead, let's just use this here. There we go. You can always reuse these pieces if you want to. So there's always another one. Let's plug this in. It's the more updated height anyways, so whatever. It's not like make or break, but let's go ahead and save, and let's get started on that base color. So, all right, so let's go ahead and get started on that base color. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to jump up. We're going to be utilizing these masks a ton, so get ready for that. Let's jump up and let's pull in our reference. I need to start color picking some of these. So we're going to shrink this reference a little bit, and we'll bring this over here. This is going to be that main reference that we're going to be color picking from time to time. Let's keep going. So all right, so let's start with a new dot node. So we'll just type in dot, and we're going to grab our color A, plug that into a gradient map. So this gradient map is now going to allow us to select some colors from that reference. So I'm going to bring this reference over, and we're going to just grab some just random colors from this one. So I'm going to hit Control-Shift-A, that way pure ref stays on top. Now what I can do is, well, I have to move it over on this side of the screen. Let's go ahead and go to the gradient editor. I'm just going to pick like 10 colors quickly. We'll do pick. I'm just going to grab like this brown, grab this gray, so on and so forth. Let's just grab, oh man, that's annoying. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we'll go down the line, pick another one, just grab this color, pick another one, grab this color. Obviously you guys will want to spend a lot more time on this than me. I'm doing a demo, so you can just quickly run through this, but this one's pretty dark. Let's increase the values. I want to have value breakup and value change, but I don't want to have too dark of values. This can hurt our overall look, and we'll have to go back and balance it anyways. So let's keep going. Let's pick a yellow one. Pick this reference has predominantly gray and yellow, it looks to me, but I think those grays and those whites are kind of, and again, here's another example of, let's lower that value down a little bit. So let's grab a couple more. Maybe grab this color, again, very dark, or rather very bright. And we can go in and grab some of these. That's a nice value. Pick another one, I don't know, something like this one. Now let's check out those colors that we have. I'm going to hide this one off screen for now. Over to my right. Now let's go ahead and address these. I don't want a solid black one, so we'll get rid of that. But this works pretty good. I like this. I don't want solid white either. So we can go in and we can balance these out a little bit. Adjust these colors. Now let's plug this in directly. This is the beginning of our base color. There we go. We already have a rock texture, right? But we're going to make it look much better, right? So let's grab an HSL. If this is too bright, too dark, we can adjust it right away. So I think right now it's fine. We might have to adjust it later. But if it does become a problem, we'll have to go in there and kind of maybe let's make it like a little bit brighter. Something like that's probably more than fine. So this is going to be our starting base color. We're just going to rinse and repeat. So let's Control C, Control V, and we're just going to continue to use that exact same setup. And we're going to use the same dot node. Let's grab a different mask so we can grab, you know what, we can use the same one for this one. This should be fine. Let's just get rid of you. You're going to be used for both my mask and my blend. So we're going to do the histogram scan. And we're going to set the histogram scan up to a pretty high value, 0.78, whatever. And we're then going to plug you in separately. So these are going to be different colors. Now I'm going to pick some warm colors from my my reference. So if I zoom over here, I'm just going to go in and pick some warm colors. For the sake of making this quick, I might just drag select and do it. Something like that. That's pretty good. That works for me. I might adjust this so we have some reds or something. You could always pick from a different rock. That's always fine too. Like maybe we use this guy. I don't know. I kind of like that one better. So let's use that HSL to kind of dumb that down. So the lightness, it's pretty light. Let's suck some saturation out of that. It's a little bit too much. Or maybe we can bring this up and then down. I don't know. This is probably good enough for now. But you can, again, use those HSLs to kind of adjust and change that. There's a lot of values in here when you do that drag select method. So if you want to go get rid of dark values, which is kind of what I was trying to do, you can absolutely do that. If you need to switch this to a more red color, you can do that. Maybe I bring it down to like 0.495. Kind of nice and warm, right? All right, let's bring this to... maybe we use a histogram shift instead. So let's grab histogram shift. This node is great for just using, like we have, let's bring the histogram to 0.5. We can literally make new masks by just shifting the data pretty easily. So let's now plug in that histogram shift here, and we'll bring this one up all the way and then just do some masking, 0.7, something like that. So now we're just going to blend these in. So let's do a blend. We're just going to use a standard blend node. That's fine. We'll do this one on the top and this one as the background, and then we'll start blending the stuff in. So we can go in and we can adjust this however we want. We can add less or more or whatever, something like this. So let's zoom back out, and we're just going to be rinsing and repeating the same setup. So let's plug that in. Shift right click, plug that in. Now we're starting to get those colors in there, right? So let's do the same thing, but we're going to do it with some more cool colors this round. So I'm going to Control C, Control V, bring this one up, plug this one into the bottom, and now we can go ahead and adjust this as we go. So let's go ahead and color pick from some more blue reference. So this one is going to be, let's see, probably more of a blue. I kind of like that as well. We can switch the mask again. Let's bring C. We're not using that one yet. Histogram shift will change that up quite a bit. And then that histogram scan, we can just put this to like 0.5 for now. We can always adjust it later. We can always reduce or add or whatever we need to do. There might be too many rocks or too little working with this. So we can use this to select those rocks, right? Works really handy. So let's go ahead and pick those cool colors. Let's use maybe the secondary ref. Maybe we use this rock. I kind of like that. So let's do a gradient editor. Let's just do that. Love it. This looks great. So with that HSL, we can adjust or change it however we want. I'm just going to do 0.5, 0.5, 0.5. There might be a dark value I don't like in there, so you can always try to go in there and find it. I'm not going to spend too much time on it just because it's hard to go through every single one of those. So what we might do is we might add in a little bit more, get some of those blue values going. If we don't like that, histogram shift it. Can always change this, right? So I liked when we were getting like dominantly blue. Okay, let's hold that, bring it over. Maybe we'll reduce the amount just a tad bit. There we go. So we're getting a nice mixture. I'll be honest, I don't like this one single blue rock, so let's use that histogram shift and adjust that. There we go. Better. Okay. This works pretty well for me. So again, rinse, repeat. Control C, Control V, and we'll keep going. So plug this into the bottom. And now what we might want to do is try bringing in like a, I don't know, a brighter value, something that's definitely maybe something like this. I kind of like this idea, so let's try it. So let's do a gradient editor, gradient, pick gradient, and I'll just grab like from here to here. There's going to be a lot of values in there. I might dumb this down. This is very bright, so I can dumb this down to here, maybe desaturate it a little bit. That feels pretty good. I like those for the white values. That feels nice. We could switch the mask if we want. Switch it to B. Always adjusting this. You don't have to do anything too crazy, but I just love being able to change this, randomizing this. It's always very helpful. So let's see what we get. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so let's plug this in. And notice how we're just layering this stuff on, getting more and more random detail. Can bring in less, bring in more, whatever you want. I kind of want to do a little bit less. No, that looks good. I like this breakup. So see how many random colors we're getting? We're getting a lot of breakup here. All right, so let's do this just probably 1 or 2 more times. I want to get some like red warm tones in there and then maybe some dark tones. So we'll do one more. And again, once you have this little recipe set up, you can see how quick this becomes, right? So let's switch this to 8, bring this over, and we'll color pick like a red value. I like this red value over here. This is something I've gravitated towards, and I've stared at it quite a bit. So let's grab it. Let's do something like that. Let's see. I kind of dig that. Why not? Let's bring that back up. So Control A, 0.5, and then we want to bring the, I kind of want more bright values in there. So let's try that again. Let's do something like this. That's better. We get a little bit more breakup in there. I'm getting the warm tones that I want, so that works. So histogram shift, we can just move this around. We'll bring this one down. We don't want a lot of red rocks, just a couple. Just plug that in. Those are feeling very purple. Don't love that. Maybe we can find a different rock that works a little bit better. Maybe I'm just not getting quite the breakup that I want. Let's try one more time. We can always adjust this in the hue and saturation too. I like the other one better. Let's see back. And let's just adjust it so it's a little more saturated here. Let's do like a 0.49 and then do a little bit of saturation. There we go. So it's getting a little bit more red, right? You can always do even more. It's starting to get a little too purple now, but maybe if we just up that saturation, something like that. We need to brighten it a little bit. There we go. That seems good. Yeah, I like that. We can do it. We can go with that. All right. So that works for me. Let's just get a couple dark values in there. So I might just go grab the blue, or I like this one. So let's do like some blue dark values. Control C, Control V. Again, plug it into the bottom. And we can very easily, we got to make sure we keep this tidy. So let's move this back a little bit. Move this up. Let's plug this one in. All right, now let's switch to a different mask. We can do mask C maybe, or mask B. We're not using mask B a ton. There we go. So let's grab our histogram shift and let's swap it to like a little lower of a value, 0.3. And then let's color map. Let's do this one. That's got a lot of breakup in it. We could do that one, or we could pick one of these other blue ones. Let's just see what we get with this one. Let's do gradient editor, pick gradient. Let's do something like this. I don't like that. I want a little bit more blue in it. Let's see, is there any rock in particular that could do it for us? Maybe this one. Let's see what we get. I think we could do that. Let's just darken it. And then maybe desaturate it a tad bit. Oop, too much. Let's do like 0.485. Something like that is probably fine. Again, way too many rocks, so we'll go in and we'll grab that position and we'll beat that down quite a few. And now what we could do if we wanted to is we could switch this to a darker value. Like we could bring this in something like that. We don't want to go too dark so it sticks out. And then it's getting pretty blue as well, 0.48. 0.47 maybe. That feels better. That's good enough for now. Again, you can always go back and edit this stuff. Some of these are feeling a little bit bright as well. If you need to go in and adjust those colors so they're a little bit darker, it's pretty easy to do. So that looks nice and balanced, kind of like jelly beans or something. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is start adding in some of this micro detail. This is an interesting workflow that I use, but it works pretty well for faking the more like granite look. Granite being like I mean, you can see it here in my reference. It gets like this marbly vein look almost. So let's try to recreate that quickly. Might not be perfect, but I think it'll get the job done. All right, that's nice and organized. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with doing 3 cells nodes. So we're going to grab 1 cells node. So we're going to use cells 2, or rather, let's use cells 4. So we're going to make one, let's set it to 800. We're going to do a small, medium, and a large one. To start, we're also going to set these to 4K. Only these nodes, though. And that is because we get a little bit better of an outcome when we set these a little higher res. So I'm just going to set it up to 4K. And now I'm going to Control C, Control V these. Make 3 of them. So we have 3. I'm going to put my smallest one here on the bottom. The middle one's going to be set to something like 500. And then this one's going to be set to something like, I don't know, 250. And this should work pretty well. Let's go ahead and we'll start with the one in the bottom, middle, top. So we're going to go smallest to largest, actually, just because we're going to be setting these right on top of each other. So let's go ahead and plug this one into a blend node. And we're just going to be using blend mode copy. We'll plug cells 4 into the top. I'm just going to blend mode copy. But what we're going to do is we're going to grab a levels. And we're just going to kind of crunch this all the way to one side. So let's try it this way. Something like this. So we just want to bring in a couple of them. We can soften this up. I kind of like that. That works for me. And now what we can do is we can just grab a histogram scan and do the opposite and mask it in. So let's do that. Histogram scan. And we'll bring this up to like 0.21. And we're going to crunch. There we go. We're going to crunch that contrast all the way up so this works as a mask. So if I click on it and I zoom in and out, you can see I get some larger veins in there. So again, rinse and repeat. So we can just Control C, Control V, and we'll plug this one into all of them. If we hold down the control key, we can just continue. Oh, we got to click first. We can just continue to plug these in. So let's see what we get. That works pretty well. I'm pretty happy with that. So from here, we need to plug in that bottom one. So now we have a small, medium, and large. We could go more in depth with that, but I think this works just fine. The next thing I'm going to do is use an edge detect, because I'm going to need to make something special out of this. So edge detect, when we plug this in, we're going to turn the edge width all the way to 0. We're going to change the roundness to 0. And then we're going to bring the tolerance up to like 9. So now you can see I have individual floating islands. What I can do is I can then use flood fill to create individual islands out of this one. So watch this. We're going to grab flood fill. If you haven't used flood fill before, super, super, super powerful node for getting variation. Let's grab flood fill to random grayscale. So what flood fill is doing is it's grabbing each island and it's creating a set of information so you can then plug other nodes in it. So now you can see I have all these shapes, and flood fill is creating islands with different random grayscales attached to it. So if you're keen on texturing, I definitely recommend using this workflow. It's super helpful for this. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to plug this node into a distance. So top of a distance, and then we're going to plug that flood fill into the bottom. Let's see what we get. Let's make sure to change that maximum distance all the way up. So now you can see all these pieces are kind of like jammed together. Looks a little different than this one. It's kind of close, but this is a little bit more controllable. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to really simply B&W spots slope blur grayscale this one. So I want to add in a little micro detail. So slope blur grayscale. We're going to plug that into the top. We're going to grab a B&W spots 2, again, one of my favorite nodes, and let's up that value up to like 4. Plug that into the bottom, and let's see what we get. Okay, this is probably way too strong. Let's up the samples, and then let's bring the strength something really low. 0.002. There we go. So that's working. I kind of like what we have. Let's grab a directional warp. So we'll grab that directional warp. And then we're going to warp it by the final height map. So we'll grab the, let's grab a dot node. And we're going to do that final height. There we go. So let's up this to something a little higher, something like 12. Again, we're just warping that detail around our rock so it kind of conforms to it nicely. Let's go ahead and plug in, keep going. Let's plug in a gradient map because now we want to add color. Now we're going to sample from our base color. Let's pick like a dark rock. Maybe this guy here. We'll try this again. Gradient enter, pick gradient, and let's do something like this. That works. I like that. Now let's plug in an HSL. This is just going to control the brightness of it. I want it to be a little bit brighter. We could add some saturation if we wanted to. That's way too much. 0.52. Just add in a little bit of color. Now you get these like blue tones. I kind of like that because it'll give us the white tones a little bit easier. It's almost looking a little bit green, so maybe 0.48. Now, whatever. We'll see what happens once we plug it in. Let's see how it looks. So let's go to our blend node. So I'm just going to pull all this up and over. Let's blend this over it. And we're going to blend this using Add Sub. Add Sub is a great tool for. We'll have to switch these. Okay, so let's do Add Sub. We're not going to be able to keep it this high, so we'll have to jump this down to like 0.45. Okay, so now you can see I'm starting to get a lot of those really fancy colors. This is working pretty good. We might grab a contrast luminosity to get rid of some of the strength, but let's see what it looks like. Let's get rid of that reference and zoom out. See what we got. There we go. So that's working for me. I dig that. It's very bright though. That's the only downside here. We can probably bring this down. Control A, 0.5. There we go. So that helps a little bit. We got to go back and balance this base color at some point, but right now is not the time. Let's grab a contrast luminosity. This is a great node for balancing, but we're just going to reduce a little bit of the contrast. So with the contrast, we'll just do like -0.1. It's a subtle difference, but it helps the readability. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is just make some like general splatter marks and some just grungy detail that we can help with selling some of this stuff. Some of this, like, if we zoom in to our reference, some of these like little splatter marks should be helpful. Okay. So let's bring this over, bring this up, and that should work just fine. So the next thing we're going to do, let's just start making these, start making some splattery details. We're going to kind of be rinsing and repeating this stuff, just same process we've already done, but let's go ahead and get started. So Clouds 2 will be our first node, Clouds 2. And what we can do with that one is we can up this to like, set it to, I don't know, maybe 3. Because we're trying to get some of this like random yellow spots or like these blue spots or brown spots in this reference. And that'll help us get there. So let's grab another dot node. We'll probably need a couple of these. We're going to grab our final height. We're going to be blending and blurring and warping around those quite a bit. So let's grab a directional warp. And we're going to warp this clouds over with our height. I'm going to set this up pretty high. We can just mess with that intensity really quick. Let's change this to something like 150. There we go. We start getting these little spirals. I like this. Now what we can do is just color sample. Let's do a gradient map. Let's color sample some like random colors from our main ref. Maybe let's do something like, see if we can find any white spots we like, or lighter spots. I'm gravitating towards this one, so maybe we can use this. Let's try it. Not that one. That's pretty bad. That works. We get a nice little breakup. We can then use that, again, HSL to work with this. We could probably just copy and paste from our previous setups over here, because it's really just going to be the same things over and over and over. So let's just do that. Let's just grab one. Control C, Control V, and I might replace this one here, and then we'll plug in our base here. And now we can delete that. And let's see, what else can we do? I might, let's see what it's looking like so far. We got a couple of rocks that's working. Let's go ahead and do another histogram select, or rather, let's do a histogram select. No, we haven't used one yet. So histogram select is similar to using like the histogram scan, but it's a little bit more control. So let's just do like 0.7, 0.41, and 0.46. Something like that probably works. Now let's go ahead and reuse this directional warp, and we're going to set it to like 100. Okay, let's go ahead and plug in this histogram select. Let's see what we get. We're just going to kind of scatter those blobs around and then use a histogram scan to select them a little bit more. So histogram scan, and we're going to up this resolution. We'll grab this contrast and bump it all the way up to 1, and then grab this and set to like 0.2 or something close to that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use this as a mask to kind of blend between here. So let's grab another blend node, and let's set, we have our histogram shift and scan. Let's bring this up to, I might make a new node here. So Control C, Control CV, and let's use a different mask. That way we just keep getting that variation in there, right? So for the scan, I might just bring this to, maybe I'll use a histogram select instead. So let's plug this in, histogram select. So let's bring it to like 0.5, 0.25, and we'll zero that out. So there's a little bit of breakup in there. Now let's plug that into the top. And we'll plug this clouds here into the bottom. Not all the way to the bottom at the opacity, but kind of in between. Now what we can do is we can set this to subtract, and we'll just kind of use it to block out or block in some of that noise. Now let's plug that in. There we go. Now we're getting some of that random detail in. So let's drag that over. Now we're starting to get some of those little splatter marks. Let's dumb that down. It's a little bit strong. There we go. That works pretty well. From here, it's going to be just rinse and repeat and kind of randomizing things. So we'll do that same process. Let's go ahead and drag everything back a little bit. Give ourselves a little more room. Control C, Control V. And then we can go ahead and plug in this blend node into the bottom again. Plug it into the top. Okay, I like this. This works pretty well. Now, the next thing we're going to need to do is color sample some of these lighter yellow values. We don't want to go too light. I think we might use like something, this blend right here could work really well. So we'll bring our clouds. Let's just change the clouds up a little bit. You could random seed it. And then our directional warp, set it to like 100. We just want to change these settings so they're a little bit different, right? Now let's color select some of those yellow tones. Oops, gradient editor, pick. Now let's do something like that. I don't like that. Let's try something like this. Okay, that's not working either. Maybe let's try this value. Maybe we'll get more luck out of something like this. I kind of like that. That works. I dig that. We could saturate this a little bit more if we wanted to, kind of get a little bit more of that cutting in there. Now what we can do is we can switch our mask yet again. So it's up to you if you want to switch that or not. Let's do... let's grab a histogram shift. Or... yeah, why not? Let's grab a histogram shift. We're just going to change this a little bit. So we'll grab a histogram shift. What we can do is then use this one as our mask. So we're going to get rid of this guy here. We're going to use U as our mask. So we'll plug this one into a histogram select. And we'll kind of crunch these values up a little bit more. Control 0.58, 0.55, and 1. So now this is really sharply cutting. The next thing I'm going to do is just plug in my... let's see. Do we like how this is directionally warping? I think this is fine. I don't really think I need to change this at all. Histogram scan, we can do a little bit. Maybe let's blur it a little bit. I don't like how harsh it is. So let's blur high quality grayscale. See how like harsh these are? I want to blur that just a tad bit. So let's bring this to like 0.12. All right, that works. I like that. Now let's plug that into the bottom. There we go. Nice and soft. So now you can see we start getting those orange splatter marks. That works pretty well. I like that. Let's move this over. And we could probably do maybe one more round, or we could probably call it quits here, but I do want to try and get some of the really dark values in here. So let's just Control C, Control V one more time. And we'll just rinse and repeat one last time. But we'll simplify this just a tad bit. So let's plug this into the bottom. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to switch my mask to maybe mask C. So always utilizing that dot node. It's super handy for this kind of stuff, right? Let's hit compute nodes thumbnails. There we go. So I kind of want to see those things. All right, let's color pick from like a darker value. One of these brown, gross looking blobs. Maybe this thing? That might be too dark. I kind of like this one. It's got a lot of breakup. So let's do gradient editor, pick gradient, and let's just grab these values. I didn't get as much as I was hoping. Whoops. Let's see what that looks like. Not quite what I want. Let's bring the saturation down, maybe the lightness. We can make it a little more like purplish, reddish. I kind of think it has more of a red tone anyways. So that works. Let's grab our clouds too, and let's adjust this just a bit. Let's bump it up to 3 so there's a bit more tiling going on. The directional warps, all that stuff can stay the same. But what I'm going to do here in the histogram scan is I'm going to bring this down quite a bit. I want just some small bumps. I don't want a ton of big ones. So let's bring it up to like 0.12. We can always adjust this if we don't like what it looks like. There we go. That works pretty well for me. Yeah, I dig that. Again, we have that blur, and then we can go in and mask based on that. So again, rinse, repeat, over and over and over and over. The last step that we're going to do is we're going to blend this. We're going to add a little bit of strength to that blend. Now let's plug that in. I have a feeling we need to adjust this a little bit. No, I kind of like that. Let's adjust the locations. There we go. I just want it to be popped out a little bit more. Awesome. So that works for me. I think we're pretty close to done with this one. I'm pretty happy with this. Let's move this up. We're kind of... yeah, let's add in some... Let's get the dirt going. I think we still haven't done that. So let's Control C, Control V. We just need the blend node itself. So I'm going to plug this into the bottom, and I'm going to plug this one into a gradient node. So it's going to be nothing right now. And I'm going to grab a dot node. Remember that dirt mask we made a long time ago? Well, we're finally going to use it. There we go. So now this is going to be blending the dirt. So let's plug that in. So we'll shift left click, drag that down, and now we have some more holy parts there. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to make like a general dirt color, B&W spots 2, and let's bring the scale up. Could probably bring it up more, but we're going to plug this into the gradient map. And we can do an HSL. I always have HSLs plugged into something just so we can control the overall look. But let's plug that in. Now we need to select from our beach sand reference. Nope, that's not beach sand. So let's just grab something like this. This might be too dark, might be too bright, I don't know. Actually, you know what? We could probably let's use this. There's a lot of like noise in here. So we'll do a gradient map, gradient, pick gradient, and we'll just grab a ton of values here. There we go. That works pretty well, actually. And value-wise, it's not bad. There we go. Cool. So we have dirt back there. We just need to fill it up. We don't need to completely finish it. That's okay. We just really needed to kind of fill in that a little bit. Next thing we're going to do is just add some grounding detail. We're very close to the finish line here. So I think all I need to do now is just add in like a little bit of dirt in the crevices and maybe fake some lighting information here. So let's grab another blend node. I'm going to grab let's just go duplicate it. Let's grab this guy. Control C, Control V. We'll plug you in. And we're going to use or rather this is going to be in the mask. Let's use that same sand. Why not? So we'll use that same sand, but we don't want to blend it quite like this. This isn't the outcome I want. Let's grab a levels. So this idea of grounding elements is what kind of brings the scene together. So beach sand gets everywhere, right? So I expect it to be a little dusty, a little in the crevices. So as you can see here, I'm just adding in a little bit of that to kind of ground this together. We're just going to add it in subtly, so maybe like 0.4. Let's plug that in. So if I turn this on and off, as you can see, kind of gives it a little bit of dust. We can go in there and crunch that levels up too, which I think I'm going to. Whoops, wrong way, since we inverted it. There we go. Yeah, I like that. That works well. Okay. Let's check that base color out. It's looking good. Okay. Yeah, I dig that. Now let's go ahead and fake a little bit of curvature in here. This helps us blend this kind of stuff together. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the normal map. I'm going to grab a curvature smooth. And then we just plug that in. Okay, we'll need to use a gradient map because this is going to convert it to a color texture. And all we're going to do is overlay it. I said overlay it. There we go. So as you bring that up and down, that really helps kind of add in a little bit of detail here. So let's do, if we zoom in, maybe just a little bit. We could add in, we could just do it on copy. I don't hate that either. Just a little bit. We don't want to do too much. This will help. If we zoom in, see how it added just a little bit of kind of darkening. Sometimes we like that, sometimes we don't. We could always try different blending modes. Let's see. Subtract isn't doing it for me either. Okay, let's get rid of that mask too. That's not helping anything. Let's do overlay. All right, let's bring that overlay. Okay, that is a little bit better. I think what we might want to do is just bring down the brightness of this texture. Also, we got to plug this one in for whatever reason that's not plugged in. Let's grab it into HSL and just bring this down for a second. I want to see what that looks like. That helps quite a bit. So we're just going to darken that down. There we go. I like that a lot. So this could be a finished base color. This could be pretty much what we're looking at. We could also do another contrast luminosity, something like that, just to kind of bring down some of those values. So if you want to bring it down a little bit, maybe contrast it a little bit, that works too. But this is a pretty good base color. I'm pretty happy with this. I'd probably spend more time adjusting tiling rocks if I notice anything that's around there, but for the sake of this demo, we'll wrap it up there. But there's one more important thing to do that's actually pretty easy. We need to make a, we desperately need to make a roughness map because we're just looking at really shiny rocks still, and that's half the reason this doesn't look kind of finalized yet. So let's go ahead and quickly do a couple things that we can to make a very quick roughness map. So I'm going to grab over here that contrast luminosity. It's like the final where we did all those little extras. I'm going to grab that contrast luminosity. I'm going to switch that to a grayscale conversion. So now we have a grayscale version of this. And I'm also going to grab the finalized output of my little granite, marble, whatevers. Let's grab a blend. And now let's bring this down. Bring this all the way down to our roughness. So we're going to plug this into our roughness first. There we go. So that already looks quite a bit more accurate. Let's go ahead and blend in. We can always control this with the levels too. So if we do like a levels, we can very quickly adjust this, brighten it up, darken it down, whatever. Let's plug this into a blend. Let's invert that. And now what we could do is just very easily add, subtract this in. I also might grab a dot node and use a mask. I always like using masks. Again, it's just such a good way to break things up. So we'll plug that into the bottom. There we go. So you notice you start getting that kind of look. Let's add sub this in. Add subtract, and we'll put it at a really low value so we get a little bit of breakup as well. That's kind of handy. There we go. If we look at it from a glancing angle, it's kind of a nice soft looks. We could go in, we could add as much detail as we want to this. Maybe I want to do, maybe I want to grab that grounding element, this here, and use that. So Control C, Control V. I'll plug this into the bottom. And then all we got to do is grab this B&W spots and plug it in. Let's do a grayscale conversion. So grayscale conversion, plug that in, and then we'll do like an add linear dodge. Whoops, this is the wrong one. I'm realizing now. We're using the dirt mask. I want to use my ambient occlusion. So let's copy and paste that one down. Let's plug that in. There we go. So now you start getting that like wild looking difference, which that definitely will help. So let's add in just a subtle amount. Let's plug that in. There we go. That's really all there is to it for this one. I could go back. I could keep spending time on this. But all in all, this is pretty much the gist of making this rock texture. I'd go in, add in a little bit of contrast luminosity, adjust these values, adjust the tiling of these rocks. But this is basically how I got to this point over here. This is the same render, just a little bit more time and care was taken. So as you can see here, super helpful. Works really well. All right, we're a little bit over, but let's keep going. I think we can continue on and make one more texture. We'll do this one pretty quick. I'll give you the high levels of this one, just so you kind of get a good idea of how we can create this smaller river stone. Okay, so we're just going to use those same rocks we've already used before. Let's go ahead and do that now. So I'm going to first off save this, and then let's jump over to, let's close this. We don't need it anymore. Close packages, we'll get rid of that. And let's jump over to our beach rock small. Just want to show you guys what the kind of final outcome of this guy looks like. So we'll view outputs in 3D. So here we go. This is what this guy looks like. I'm just going to pull this one off, and we're going to create a new graph. Let's do File, New, Substance Graph. Actually, what we could do before we do that, let's reopen. I kind of want to add in, I want to open our large rock, beach rock again. I'm just going to reuse some of these graphs. There's not really a point in not reusing these. So to create the small beach rock, we're gonna need to make an atlas out of our rocks that we sculpted. So let's go ahead and do that first. I think that'll be a little bit of fun. So let's bring this down. We're gonna jump over back into ZBrush, and let's go ahead and load up our beach rock. We're gonna go to let's see. I'm going to jump down to ZBrush. We'll do Rock Atlas. I'm going to do Rock Atlas Start. So I'm just going to zoom out. What you need in this file in order to create this atlas quickly is you're going to need a plane. And all I did for this plane, as you can see, it's a 7x7 plane, so there's 49 pieces. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I want about 50 rocks. So this works pretty well for me. I find 8, so I find 8 is a little too many, but I think that like 49 right around there is just fine. So let's go ahead and get this set up. So this working file, all I have is my decimated rocks. So you can see here's all my rocks decimated. Let's zoom in. You can see this guy, get rid of this guy. There's my decimated rock file. And let's go ahead and open that up. So, whoops, didn't mean to save that. Let's load. Let's go to ZBrush, and we'll go to those rocks large, and we'll just grab these decimated ones. Okay, so you can see it's the exact same thing. What we're gonna need to do is create an insert multi-mesh brush. And this is pretty easy to do. Really all we need to do is quickly create an insert brush. So if we go to brush, we're going to go to create insert multi-mesh. So this is going to take all the rocks that we have available right here, and it's going to create an insert multi-mesh brush. But I don't want to stop there. I want to make a nano mesh brush. So we'll grab nano mesh. I'm going to hit OK. And now we have a nano mesh brush. Let's go to brush settings. We're going to go down to modifiers, and we need to remember to set the modifier selector to 1. So this is going to now cycle between our brushes. Let's go to the brush and let's hit save as. We're going to save this into our desktop brush. Let's do full sail demo, and let's do new folder. Let's do rock atlas. There we go. So we'll do a, I don't know, insert let's do, sorry, it's nano mesh, nano rock brush. So So I like to save these out, and that way I don't have to remake them all the time. It's pretty handy. Remember that file that we just opened? Let's jump back there. So what we need to do now is use this plane. So we're going to use this plane as an insert multi-mesh brush. Whoops. Okay. Settle down. So let's bring that over. This is kind of handy. As you can see, with this insert multi-mesh brush, I'm now able to draw some of these brushes out. What I probably am going to do is I'm just going to delete these other subtools. I don't really need them. So we're just going to delete, always, delete. Let's keep going. There we go. So that's pretty handy. Works fine for me. So let's go ahead and just draw out a bunch of rocks. So if I draw, all I got to do is just click on this. For some reason, this is moving really slow. Not sure why. Let's turn shadows off maybe. If I draw this out, if you draw it to the right size, like right here, let's turn on polyline fill. That way we can see it. Let's turn on fill as well. How nanomesh works is it remembers the last thing you did. So if I just now click in here, I can just now click on these squares over and over and over. For whatever reason, this is moving really slow. I'm not sure why this is moving so slow, but I just wanted to show you guys this is how I'm going to create this brush. Sometimes when this happens, it's just a matter of maybe these rocks are too high poly. Maybe there could be a plethora of different issues with why this is behaving this way. But I just go through here, fill out every one of these squares. So we have 49 different rocks. And again, the brush is cycling through each one of these, right? And adding brushes or adding pieces as we go. So if we let it finish, I'm going to go over here to nanomesh. Say I finished all of this out. Since it's moving so slow, I'm not going to restart just because I feel like we're spending too much time on this aspect, which isn't as important. But let's go to nanomesh and let's do a quick, let's do the inventory, and we can hit 1 to mesh. So we just need to click this a bunch of times. This is going to then add all of these rocks to one mesh. You can see it's moving really slow. Again, I think that ZBrush probably just needs to be restarted. I'm not sure why this is moving so slow. Typically, this isn't nearly this bad. It is a little bit frustrating that it's doing that. Not sure what that's all about. But I think maybe there's something drawn on here that shouldn't be. Yeah, something got merged on accident. I'm not sure what it is. But if we go to polygroups, or rather nanomesh. So let's jump down. Where are you, nanomesh? I just saw you. PM. I think it's done working for me for now. Maybe ZBrush is kind of tired of me. Maybe let's go ahead and I'm just going to close down ZBrush. This sometimes happens. So let's grab our task manager. ZBrush is being a pain. There we go. So ZBrush is down. Let's just reopen it. The important thing is once we have, and of course you're going to open on the wrong monitor. Let's drag this back over. Once you have that atlas drawn out, it's really easy to, let's jump back over to our beach rock tutorial. So let's do ZBrush, atlas. Let's do, let's just open up the beach rock atlas, rock atlas A. So the important thing is when you've drawn this out, you should have all of these options. You should have this nice mesh drawn out here. Now, what I like to do after you do that all 1 to mesh click, where it's adding, when you hit 1 to mesh with a multi-mesh, let's grab this plane. So if I open up a brush, let's just open up that multi-mesh brush really quick so I can show you. Let's go ahead and open up that other brush. So we're going to go to load brush and we're going to go to rock nanomesh brush again. Hit OK. And I think because we have this other brush in here already, it's moving really slow. So if you do this from the beginning of a scene, it's much more manageable. So let's go to nano mesh, and I'm just going to hit inventory 1 to mesh. There we go. So let's select this subtool. Yeah, I think because there's some like weird history or something that's working with it, but when we have this mesh, after we hit 1 to mesh, it's going to create separate mesh that we can then use to bake to the plane. So long story short, what we need to do is now bake this to a plane. So we'll open up Rock Atlas A. You can make as many of these as you want, by the way. I made 2 of them. So let's go to document, and let's switch this to 2048 or 4K, whichever one you want to bake at. I'm probably just going to do 4090, or let's do 2048. That's fine. 2048 by 2048. Resize. Remember to turn shadows off. Hit Control N. Zoom out. T. Frame it up. And now you can very easily go in here and grab dock. I want to hit best render before I do that. I'm just going to grab dock, and then all you need to do is export this out into Substance Designer. So let's jump back into Substance, and we're going to really quickly open up our Rock Atlas. We're basically going to take that height map that we have here, the one we just baked out, and we're going to just plug it right into the graph we just made for this this beach rock. So let's go ahead and copy and paste that over. So I have this beach rock already open. We're going to save as, and I'm going to switch this over to Full Sail Demo. So we're going to do, let's do new folder. I already have a Rock Atlas, so let's try this one. Rock Atlas A. And it's pretty easy. Now that we have all of these portals in here, we can just relink all this stuff really simply. So right click, import, or rather link. You can do either one. I'm going to link a bitmap. So I'm going to jump over to my desktop, and we're going to go down to ZBrush, Rock Atlas, and it looks like we don't have it there. So let's check the Substance folder. So Rock Atlas, Beach Rock, Rock Shell. Let's try this one. There we go. So I'm just going to grab Rock Atlas A, and I'm just going to show you guys real quick how we can very simply adjust this. So we have this file here. I'm just going to drag and drop. It's going to take a while to kind of adjust to that. Okay. Now all we need to do is make a histogram scan. And we can very, very easily just bring the position up to like 0.5 and then bring the contrast up to 1. So now you can see this is a perfect opacity mask. So what I would do here now is we're not going to use the dirt mask. It's not going to be necessary. What I can do now is use a flood fill. And then I can use flood fill to random grayscale. And this is going to essentially do the exact same thing we did above. Now what we can do, now because we have all those portals, is we can just Control C, copy 3 of these. We can just plug these in really easily. So I'm going to plug this into A. And you can just watch it change. B. And then C. And we can delete this out. There we go. Now you can see that's nice and updated. We need to randomize these flood fills though. So the top one we'll just set random seed. Middle one we'll set random seed as well. So we'll rename this to Rock Atlas A. There we go. So we can hit save. Awesome. That works nicely. The last thing we need to do is make a portal for our opacity. So we'll grab an opacity, or rather we'll grab a dot node, and we'll make a opacity output. Awesome. Let's jump down to the height map, and I'm going to make a output for the opacity because we're going to need that as well. So I'll just duplicate the height, type in opacity, copy and paste, and then let's switch the usage over to opacity. All right, this works pretty well. I'm happy with that. But the thing is, we need to change our dot node. So Control C, Control V, plug that in. We'll select it and change it to opacity. I'm not going to view this because I don't need to view that right now, but I am going to use this to make some edge padding for this. What I'll do, you can grab a distance node for this. It works pretty well. Grab a distance node, plug it in here, and then you can grab that source, plug the opacity in here. I believe these are upside down, so there you go. Now you have a nice set of edge padding that works really well. You can go through, adjust if there's any issues for like random color. I think everything is in order since we are reusing this so simply. I don't think we need to make any adjustments. You can see they're all textured. It's working well. Now we can straight up use this rock atlas very easily for different things. So I can save that. And now let's jump back to a fresh file. So I'm going to go to File, New. Before I do that, actually, I'm going to show you guys what I'm going to use for the background sand. So with this beach rock that we're making, this kind of final, let's bring it up really quick. If I zoom over here, this beach rock, well, I have some like water behind it. This beach rock's going to have sand behind it. That's going to be I guess the background of this texture. So to really quickly put that into perspective, all we need to do is use a simple sand. So I'm not going to go over this graph. It's just a really simple like sand texture I made. It's nothing fancy. The base color is literally 3 nodes. But all we need is the height information and a little bit of color. This is what's important. So if we go File, New, Substance Graph, I'm going to bring this over and we're going to do small beach rock. So we'll save as, and we'll jump over to that Full Sail demo, use this new folder for small beach rock. There we go. So let's save that, and this will be the exact test bed that we need. Now, remember those atlases that we made? We're going to use that sand, and we're going to use the atlases we just created to really nicely make a tileable texture. Let me show you how we can do that really quickly using a node called Atlas Scatter. It's a lot of fun. So we'll plug this in. Let's bring in our beach sand. So I have that sand plane already loaded in, and I can just straight up drag this in. Now with those rock atlases, I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm going to bring in Rock Atlas A and Rock Atlas B. Remember, you need to have that opacity because this is going to be pretty important as we use this, use these nodes to stack on top of each other. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and use a node called Atlas Scatter. So if we type in Atlas, we'll have Atlas Scatter right here. This is a great node for using scans, using your own atlases like we just created, or using basically anything you want from, say, textures.com or Megascans to add to your texture. I like to use it for my own scans that I make. It works really well. So let's go ahead and adjust the contrast luminosity of the sand. This is going to be our background. If we switch into 3 mode, this is going to hit all of our BRDFs. I'm going to plug this in, and I'm going to plug this first one in here. Now you can see I have a sand background and I have rocks tiling on top of each other. Now we have a lot of work that we still need to do, but I kind of want to adjust some things before we go too far. Let's switch back in and hit 1. Now let's plug this height into our, we could probably do it in the pattern distribution, but for now, maybe let's plug the normal map into the vector map, and let's grab the height map, grab a levels, and I'm just going to kind of make this one a little bit darker. I think right now it's a little too, bright. I kind of want my rocks to be really stacked in there, so I need to have a darker background in the height map in order for this to work. So we'll plug that into the height. And I might adjust the, let's grab a contrast luminosity. I might adjust the brightness or the contrast of this dirt texture too. I don't want those light values to be kind of popping in too much. So you can see how much that changes. All right, so let's hit the 3 key. I'm going to plug this into our BRDFs and we can see what we get. Okay. So we'll scroll onto the front. We already basically have a texture. This works. So you can see how quickly this process is when it comes to creating these things. So whatever background you might have, whether it's beach, sand, dirt, whatever, you can really easily stack these different things onto here pretty quickly. So let's go ahead and do some other housekeeping really quickly. Let's grab our height and do an auto levels. So I always want to be using an auto levels for this. Let's drag this all the way over to our height map. And we're also going to plug this into an RTAO. RTAO. There we go. And we're going to set this to real world values. And I'm going to do the same thing I did before. I'm going to do 300. Oh, that's 30. Let's do 300 by 300. And we'll do 30 for, let's do 25. Why not? That works pretty well. I'm happy with that AO. So let's plug that in. And this should work pretty well. So this is saying it's, in the Z, it's saying it's 25 centimeters tall. So I can't imagine the rocks are going to be that much taller than that. So this is a pretty accurate rendition of what we're going for. Let's go ahead and just scatter a couple atlases. We probably won't get done with the whole texture, but let's do just a couple. And I can show you how we can start layering in these rocks and create a full-on texture really easily. So let's first start with the background. What I'm going to do is, I love the first atlas scatter to be able to just really nicely sit on top of the sand. I don't want it to be doing anything crazy. I'm going to up the value to like 80 by 80. I would go in, I would grab that vector for the position. You can do a little position random. You can do some vector map multiplier. That's always helpful for that. And we have that vector map plugged in there. And you can see this is starting to move around. Now, the next thing I want to do, I always want to be clicking on my height map and checking it. So let's see what it looks like. It's sitting kind of nicely behind it, but I want to move it maybe a little bit further back. So there's these awesome height scale options in Atlas Scatter. Atlas Scatter works just like Tile Sampler, or if you've ever used Shape Splatter, it's very similar to those workflows. So let's try, let's bring down the height scale down to like, or maybe let's bring it up to, let's try this. So down to like 0.25 to 0.27. So I can see it's sitting there, but it's not very high. It's not really affecting the range. But what I do want is I want it to fill up a little bit of space. I just want these to be there to sit behind everything. So there's all these masking options down here. I definitely go through, play with all these options. There's so many helpful tools inside of Atlas Scatter to make things. So I'm just going to add a little bit of masking. I'm going to bring the scale up to like 2. Let's see what happens. That might be too big, but we can add a little bit of scale random, so on and so forth. Now let's try, let's duplicate this one. So I'm going to Control C, Control V. And let's grab our second atlas. So we're using Atlas A here. Let's use Atlas B for this one. Remember I said I made 2? This is just an example of me updating that. So all I'm going to do is go into that 3 mode, so you can switch between BRDF and single mode. I'm just going to replace the background, and then I'm going to update that normal under the vector map. So now you can just start layering these in. If it looks like this starts getting pretty ugly, you'd be correct. It does. It takes a little bit of time to kind of get used to how this adjusts and moves around. But once you get everything plugged in, you can just stack these on really nicely and start building this texture up one by one. So I like to work bottom to top and then largest to small, or smallest to largest. So I'm going to set the largest rocks in all the way at the end. So this is going to be another background map. So I'm going to set this to like 140. So for the amount of these rocks. So there's a ton of them tiling in here now. Now you can see, let's grab a little bit of that mask random. You can adjust this. Also another cool feature is there's like color. You can do like random color changes if you want to get in some rainbow rocks. But this works really well for making any adjustments to these colors. It's very helpful. So let's raise this one up. So if you see this, if I look closely, this height scale is going to control how, like the actual scale of that height map. So I'm just going to raise that up. Let's look at the height map itself. So you can see this layering in. Bring it all the way up. Now you can see it's sitting there nicely. So again, rinse and repeat. So we can keep doing that over and over. So the next one I might set it to a lower value, but I'm going to switch between this atlas and this one. So Control C, Control V. We'll plug this one. Let's switch back to that 3 mode. Plug this one into the bottom. And we have Rock Atlas A plugged in again. So now we can drag and drop that in. There we go. And then all we got to do is update that normal map. And it's really just rinse and repeat from there. And again, I'm going from largest to smallest right now, and front to back. So I'm going to switch these rock scales to like, let's do, I don't know, 87 by 87. Why not? Kind of a random number to choose, but it works pretty well. We might up the scale a little bit too. You could do a little bit more scale random, and then you could always mask these. But the next thing we're going to probably need to do is plug this into the height map first. There we go. Nice. So that works really quite well. Let's bring the height scale up all the way. So again, this is pretty much a rock texture already. We could use this in a game, no problem. So from there, I'm just going to layer in that detail and keep placing this stuff from one to one until I get the outcome that I'm really looking for. So if I bring my main graph back over, this is what this guy looks like once we get this kind of finished up. All right, so let's view outputs in 3D and we can check this one out. So you can see here, this is my finalized texture. You can just keep piling that detail on there. I did, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of these. I only made it through 3 with you guys. So you can see I just keep, if I zoom in here, go to my, let's check out our height map. I just keep layering this stuff in one by one. Playing with that height scale, adjusting, adding in larger rocks until you finally get that last little bit. And then you get a really nice outcome, as you can see here. If you need to add any additions on at the very end, that's super easy to do. You can grab a base color, plug it into whatever you need, plug it into this blend node, and you can start adding in that grounding element. That's kind of what I did as well. So you can see here, here's that dirt texture. Remember how I added that grounding element into my my large river rock? I'm doing the same thing to my small river rock, as you can see here. There we go. All right, well, that's the process that I use for creating these 2 different rock textures that can be blended together really easily. From there, this is just getting it into Engine, finishing this up. To kind of recap all the things that we covered, which was a lot, we definitely started all the way back in Maya, creating that sculpt plane, brought it into ZBrush, sculpted up some of those rocks, and use those rocks to duplicate all over the canvas to make that tiling texture. That large rock tiling texture that we made does a really good job. You don't see any penetrating rocks. You get a nice stacked, very even keel looking rock. Whereas this other rock that we made completely in Substance Designer using our atlas, there's definitely some rocks that are jammed into each other, but at this scale, you're never going to notice it. So it's not something that I'm super worried about. So this is my process. This is how I kind of tackle these things. There's a bunch of different applications that you can use for this. For instance, if I were to open under Substance Designer, I have a couple more. Let's jump and check out my sand packed. I have this texture that I made as well using seashells, which is kind of handy. Let's open this guy up really quickly using that same exact method. So I made an atlas with seashells. I made an atlas with the rocks. And now you can see I have like a nice little beach sand, and you can see my little seashells creeping in here as well. Let's add a bunch more. Let's go to that masking and do none. You can make as much seashells as you want, or as little. Looks like those ones are all in the background. There we go. So you can see you can add in more, add in less, whatever. Let's do like 50 and 50, and then let's increase the scale quite a bit. There you go. So now you can see we have a ton of seashells here. So you can see how beneficial this would be. It's really handy for creating textures. All right, well, that's all I've got for you guys. Does anyone have any questions? Awesome. Well, if you're watching this recording, I hope you enjoyed this. This was a pretty raw recording, so there's a little nuggets of where I wasn't perfect, and that's how it goes. Nothing's ever going to be perfect when you're making this stuff. So hopefully you guys can see that and keep building forward, and hopefully you learned something. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon. Bye now.